Sorry we're late. Those of you, I know there was a pool on this, and I'm sorry to disappoint the people who bet I was right.
Oh, no one bet.
I don't
There were
know
none.
if it's here.
No one bet on you.
We're hurting our panelists, and we'll get started briefly.
Who else besides Dave? There's got to be a fourth one.
Maybe I better do the hurting. As we get started, and I will just count on our missing panelist getting here at some point during the panel. I'm sure that will happen. We now have a series of speakers from water agencies who are doing a variety of things. Again, I will not give their full bios, but again, all of them have a wealth of experience in water supply issues of many, many kinds, and we'll get some different views and different suggestions, not only along the lines of what other water agencies should do, but what we should do, which kinds of authorities to exercise, and how we can be most helpful. Our first speaker will be David Pettijohn, who's the Director of Water Resources at LADWP. And David, I really appreciate your joining us with a wealth of experience on so many issues, both water quality and water supply. That will be terrific. He is also a civil engineer. Then we'll be followed by David Peterson from Peterson, is that the right pronunciation? Okay, Peterson from Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, where he is the general manager, and he also comes from experience also at the Irvine Ranch Water District, which I think everybody knows of. He's also a civil engineer. He's going to be a panel for your heart, Steve, and yeah. So, speaking from the narrative wing of the Water Board, with all due respect to the engineering wing, who usually sits together on the Water Board. It takes a village, you know. Then we'll hear from Tom Ash at Inland Empire's Utility Agency. He's a senior environmental specialist and similarly has many years of experience, in this case in water use efficiency, public education, and horticulture. And then finally, last but absolutely not least, we'll have Kirby Brill, the head of the Mojave Water Agency, but also former executive director of the impressive San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority, as well as an expert in groundwater, and he also is a civil engineer. So we have a theme going on this panel. So with that, let's, with no further ado, let's turn to Mr. Pettijohn. Yeah, 10 minutes, yeah.
Board members.
Push your.
Got it? Okay, yeah. I should know better. Good morning. I'm David Pettijohn, Director of Water Research for LA Water and Power. I'm going to talk to you to start off today with a little about what LA is currently doing in response to the drought. So hopefully you'll find this informative and give you some ideas. Some of our conservation strategies, we have accomplished a lot of water savings through multiple water conservation strategies. We have our rebate programs, which are fairly robust. They provide extensive water efficient device rebates all over our service territory, and that includes our $3.75 per square foot of turf removed. We also invest heavily in our education and outreach program, and that's designed to remind our customers the importance of conserving water during a drought, and that gets at our behavioral-based conservation. Likewise, we have multiple local regulations which set water use efficiency guidelines for our customers and restrict water waste. That's on the bottom left here. You see our 3-day-a-week watering schedule. And then also we have continued to conduct specialized water conservation studies in our system to investigate emerging water efficient technologies. We're doing a water conservation potential study, and also we recently completed our water loss audit component analysis. One of the most effective programs is our technical assistance program, and I know the board had asked us to talk about this a little. So we provide our commercial, institutional, industrial, and multifamily residential customers with $1.75 for every gallon, 1,000 gallons that they can serve. And we'll provide customers up to $250,000 through this program for products that demonstrate water conservation in their businesses. And the program's been very well received by our customers across the city, and we find it to be a very cost-effective program. Overall, this program has provided us with water at $2.28 $228 per acre-foot water, which is very low. And so far, the program has conserved over 1.2 billion gallons of water.
What, I should know this, I used to know this, but I don't remember. What percentage of your water deliveries are to commercial industrial as opposed to residential?
Yeah, but our residential customers use probably about 60% of our water.
60.
And then about 40 is commercial, industrial, institutional, and so it's about that type of a split.
One of the things that some people, because we focused on residential in part because it is more even across the way as opposed to, and we also didn't want to do numbers that lumped in commercial industrial because it's so different. If you have a brewery as LA does or San Diego does, it can skew your numbers pretty much. But we don't value the commercial sector. It's just they take a different approach.
Yeah, you look at like the City of Industry, there's not a lot of residents there, but they have a lot of water use. So if you did GPCD on them, everybody would look like they were using enough water to float an ocean.
Right, there are some of those. And the golf course communities end up in the same boat.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think LA is demonstrating how important it is to target programs to the CII sector because they really are low-hanging fruit because they're smart and they're contained and they know how to get things. They have lots of engineers usually. But you just recently did a Ralph's grocery store remake of all the cooling tower work for all of them. And it's you've had big savings.
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, I'm
I've got a slide on that.
It's important to be known.
Yeah.
So I was going to give two examples of our TAP program. This first one is just something that we started long ago. It's essentially laminar flow faucets here, aerators for essentially hospitals. And right now we have a total of 12,600 of these laminar flow aerators in hospitals, and we are saving about 300 acre-feet a year with this program. And the program was so successful in the city of LA that Metropolitan adopted it in their regional program in July of 2013. And this is our supermarket program. So this is essentially a TAP program where we have essentially incentivized evaporative condenser water treatment for supermarkets. And this pilot started out with one major supermarket chain. In October of 2013, they did 6 stores, and it was so successful they decided, well, let's put it in all our stores. And through the middle of last year, we've gotten in 49 stores so far. Average water savings is 720,000 gallons per year per store, and that's about 25% of the store's total annual water use. So very effective. But there's an ancillary benefit here. We're also seeing about a 4% reduction in energy at these stores, and that equates to about a $9,600 a year reduction in their energy bill. So these are just a couple of examples of the TAP program in LA.
What is this?
Say that again?
I don't know what the evaporative condenser does.
Well, it essentially conserves water. What you can do is you monitor the pH of the water flowing through the condenser, and you can essentially change that pH by putting in inhibitors, and you can continue to recirculate the water through the system
Much longer than you would have
much longer than you
otherwise.
normally would if you didn't. And so we incentivize putting those in, and it saves quite a bit of water by doing that. Just eliminates the scaling that occurs in the facility. But we've got over 140 TAP projects that we've completed to date, and they include all kinds of things like reverse osmosis, treatment systems, high efficiency, and coffee houses, cooling tower upgrades, which again help you recirculate water more efficiently through those, and then commercial laundry upgrades, just more efficient devices. During the drought, this has been a really important program for us. Essentially, as our media campaign, focused media campaign, we invest heavily in this focused media, especially during the drought, and we've got a lot of partnership opportunities with Metropolitan and other agencies in Southern California. A lot of agencies invest in these programs. But we've advertised in a variety of ways in the city of LA. You can see here a few of them: bus tails, bus benches, bus shelters. We have movie theater ads. If you go to the movies in LA, you'll see those. Television spots, radio spots, and print and newspaper media ads we put out. And we've also been very active this year in our grassroots outreach. We do a lot of presentations for public organizations. We have neighborhood councils all over the city that we've appeared at. nonprofit groups. And then we staff outreach booths at all kinds of public events all across the city. So here's some of the effect of this public media campaign. You can see here a comparison between 2013 and 2014, and this is just our website traffic. So this gives you an insight into how aware people in the city are becoming due to our messaging. So from April to October this year, there have been 90,000 visitors to our water conservation websites compared to less than half that much last year. And just starting in July this year, you can see a huge surge in our website traffic, way over twice what it was last year. So we suggest that the state consider investing in additional public messaging, such as television ads for wide exposure to continue to remind Californians all over the state of the importance of water conservation during the drought. Here's, let's see here. There we go. Here's a statewide message that we've noticed. It's essentially brown is the new green. Good message, but while this type of temporary conservation message is good, we recommend the state invest in more permanent conservation messaging as well. And maybe do this, but also do things like this. And this is what our message is to people, is that the new normal is essentially California-friendly landscapes. So moving away from high water use landscapes to these beautiful, low water intensity landscapes that are drip irrigated. What have we been doing as far as enforcement of our ordinances? It's good to have ordinances, but if the public knows you're not enforcing them, chances of them complying with those aren't that good. We have a pretty good track record on enforcement. We're in phase 2 of our emergency water conservation ordinance in the city. We have about 6 team members, 4 full-time, 2 part-time. These are the full-time guys. We have access to we can ramp up to 9 enforcement personnel if needed. And this water crew covers 465 square miles of the city, and we've also added new car wraps. You see those here.
That's great.
And so we've been pretty successful. This is essentially a legend that shows you where the citations have been issued throughout the city. So we've had citations all over the city, ranging from, in the 20s all the way up to the hundreds, and some of the areas more than others, and a lot of this depends on where we get people contacting us reporting water waste. So in some areas, people are pretty aggressive about reporting water waste when they see it, and we get out there and investigate. So from 2009 to 2012, we received 30,000 reports of ordinance violations, and of those, 9,000 people were issued warnings or citation letters, and 300 ended up getting monetary fines. And you end up with a monetary fine if you really just don't respond to the letters and our response unit coming out to visit. So since just January of this year, we've received over 6,000 reports of violations, and of those reports, about 5,000 received warning or citation letters, but only a handful of fines. Most people in the city are pretty responsive when we come out and make contact with them and explain to them how they're violating the ordinance. Okay, so this is something we like to show. We're pretty proud of this. We started our water conservation program essentially in the 1900s when we fully metered the city. In the 70s, we really started implementing conservation programs and incentive programs. And to date, our customers have achieved, just for hardware-based conservation alone, that's just hardware we've installed, 110,000 acre-feet a year of hardware-based conservation. That's not just behavioral. This shows you our full conservation message dating over the whole life of our program all the way back to the 70s. And you can see that it's pretty flat in our water use, and then we've got about 1 million more people living here. And our GPCD, if you look back in the 70s, early 80s, we were up around the 190s. Now we're down at the 130s. So we've wrung out a lot of waste from the city.
This to be clarified. Your 130 number, I know that's the one that the mayor referenced in his statement. That's not our residential, because your residential is 89 or something.
Yeah, our residential is lower. This is all in.
This includes your commercial and industrial.
Yeah, so the way this is calculated is a good question. The way we calculate this, it's all the water that comes into the city from any source versus how many people live inside the city. You divide those two numbers. So it includes unaccounted water, water losses, theft, fire flows, flush and close, all that is in here. It's an all-in number. Okay, here's something that we think we think could be done a little bit differently. So don't take it as a major criticism, but we think it's a minor criticism. So recently the board's presentations have focused attention on seemingly poorer performing areas, and in particular the South Coast region, has been highlighted as having a low percentage water use reductions. So LADWP and other agencies have been stressing the importance of considering the shortfalls of simply comparing 1 year's water use to the prior year. And this has been discussed this morning as well, so I know this is resonating. And of course, that doesn't account for significant impacts of differences in weather and historical water conservation. So shown here, of course, the city of San Jose is in the San Francisco Bay Area, which was mentioned before. I can see now that I have to speed up considerably, so I'm going to go real quick. And you can see here that even though they've done a great job in San Jose, their GPCD is down to 95. For us, it's in the 89 range. Our performance is only 2.4%. Their performance is about 12%. So it looks like they're doing a lot better, even though the GPCD is a bit higher than ours. Here's another area in the San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay Mud. They were very good in what they did. They brought their GPCD down close to where San Diego's is. San Diego is very efficient, but you can see that if you just look at a year over year, they kicked up slightly in their water use, but still very efficient at 76 GPCD. So looking just at the pure percentage, you would think that San Diego is way underperforming, and the San Francisco Bay Area is doing a great job, but the reality is they're doing about the same. So here's another, this is almost my last slide. This is just showing you where we think maybe would be a good potential next step. You look at the population served, you look at the percent of residential GPCD that's less than 100 for all these areas. You can see in the South Coast, it's about 60% of our areas using less than 100 GPCD. Some of the other areas are quite a bit over 100 GPCD. In particular, you look at the Sacramento River area, even though their percent reduction year over year from October was 18.5%, they still have about almost 90% of their customers use over 100 GPCD. So we think that focusing more on a residential GPCD might be one step in the right direction. So here's just our list of recommendations. First, the state board could focus on residential GPCD, as we mentioned, and we think that residential GPCD should be consistent in how it's calculated. I know Tim Brick mentioned including non-revenue water. If percent reductions are used, we think a better comparison would be look at percent reductions over a longer period of time. We think saturation studies can also be a very useful tool on how much more water conservation savings can be conceivably achieved in various service areas. And we also would like to see the state board collect data on the number of days per week each supplier allows in watering, and maybe also consider the number of minutes per station on those days a week watering. And then finally, just the conservation messaging being more on permanent water use reductions. And then the last thing I'd like to say is there was, on the 14th of this month, the California Urban Water Agencies put together what I thought was a pretty thoughtful letter in response to a lot of your questions as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'm sorry I went long.
A question. I know we agree on the fairness of all of that, which is why we went with our GPCD. But the fact is that there are some places that are low that are continuing to do more than Southern California, which is true. So and we're not at the saturation point yet. I get the issue of doing the studies to be fair, but the mayor's come up with a great plan to reduce a further 20% in a fairly short period of time. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you're thinking about? Because you're going to then, to meet that goal, you're going to end up having to be on the cutting edge for major urban areas. And I don't want to prejudge, because I know you haven't finished your process yet with the water cabinet and the like, but presumably you're going to have to step it up, and I was hoping we could learn from you all.
Well, that's very true. Our goals for water conservation are very aggressive. We've got the water conservation potential study that we're doing, and we're hoping that that's going to give us an idea of where the next low-hanging fruit is going to be. So that's going to be very important to try to drive some of our incentive programs. Those are going to be a big part of what we do, but also we're going to ramp up our messaging even more than we're doing now. We're trying to really push that messaging to the public. We are asking the city right now, is it mandatory 2-day-a-week watering just for the city properties? The mayor has said that if we don't reach the targets by the middle of next year, the entire city will on a mandatory basis be at 2-day-a-week watering. So there are things that we're going to do behavior-wise, and with our conservation potential study, we're going to retool our whole incentive program to try to focus on the next areas of low-hanging fruit. But one thing I would like to say is I think that, looking at the regional, the way we do it, we look at regional like, San Francisco Bay region, South Coast region. We might think about looking at more on an agency level. The one chart that showed,
right.
The large blobs, and it was really broken down to where the agencies are. That might be a better metric to look at, because when you lump all the cities together in a region, you have some very, well-performing cities who are lumped into a region that might not be doing so well,
That's a fair
and it
point.
leaves the wrong impression.
We've talked about that. When is the potential study supposed to be done?
We're supposed to have that done by next year, so
I have a question about,
next year we'll, yeah.
December 31st.
Well, hopefully before the middle of next year, yeah.
Question about leaky pipes.
Yes.
What are your efforts to reduce and then also to meter?
Yeah, this is a good question because, water systems across the country, including ours, get a lot of criticism on water waste by leaky pipes and having a leaky system. And it can be true. I mean, you look at, I don't mean to call out any cities in the United States, but Philadelphia's got about a 40% unaccounted water rate. And
We have some communities that are 50 to 80%
Yeah.
leakage, yeah.
yeah, the non-revenue, and I'm using the wrong, Tim's going to correct me, I'm supposed to be saying a non-revenue water, but some of those non-revenue water rates are very high, they can be up around 40%. So we were concerned about this because we do get criticized a lot. I mean, we have, our break rate is actually below the national standard, but when a pipe breaks in the city of LA, you've got helicopters overhead, and every now and then you've got a really bad one where, some very nice wooden floor gets inundated. And
A
so you get lot of
well-loved
press.
wooden floor, yes.
So in response to that, we were anxious to confirm our level of water leakage. And so we did a water loss audit and component analysis of our entire system. And interestingly enough, that study showed that our overall non-revenue water rate was 5.2%. Now, the industry standard is about 10. And then we broke that down even further, and we found that the real loss is due to leakage. So we took out apparent losses, those are meter inaccuracies and theft, and we also took out authorized consumption that we don't charge for, like fire flows and flushing flows. We stripped that out just to get to the actual leak rate in the system. It's only 3.5%. So we actually have one of the tightest, we have arguably the tightest large water system in the entire country. So even though you see every now and then a fire truck in the street, and you see, something that gets flooded that makes the news, we actually have very low unaccounted water. But to answer your question, we're not satisfied with that. What we did is we put together a water loss task force that is going to address all the recommendations that came out of the report. And we've got over 100 people involved in that at the department right now, working on identifying the things that we can do to reduce that 3.5% even lower. And we're trying to prioritize those based on their return on investment.
So with respect to, low-hanging fruit for your community or others, I mean, it sounds like you've already done quite a bit, but for those that have those higher numbers, what can be done? Because it can be pretty costly.
Well,
what would be
I
sort
think,
of targeted actions?
Yeah, I think that these kind of water loss audits can be very useful. And we found it to be extremely useful. And there are various levels of audit that you can do. Some, you can spend a lot of money on these audits, but there's some simple auditing that you can do that isn't that cost prohibitive. And I would say that, maybe some thought should be given to the idea of doing water loss audit and component analyses, maybe statewide, but not on a level that's cost prohibitive.
David, are you ready?
Thank you. Dave Peterson, Las Virgenes Municipal Water District. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our agency is doing. We're in the process of making a change in the way we approach conservation and water use efficiency. So I'll talk a little bit about that, what we're doing now, and what's really driving us to change. And then I have some recommendations for the board to consider. So a little bit about our agency. We're a retail water provider in the northwestern part of LA County. We buy all of our water from Metropolitan Water District. We were an early adopter of recycling, and so we meet 20% of our overall water demands with recycled water. And we also provide sanitation services and recycling, wholesale, and also composting. So in March of this year, our board made a decision and adopted an action plan and a timeline for us to transition to budget-based water rates. And this is really what we think is the future, at least for our agency, to drive efficiency. So when you think about what's important, and certainly being an engineer, we talk a lot about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We often forget why we do the things that we do, and more frequently don't explain them. So to give some context, I'll tell you a little bit about our current approach, what we're doing right now. So, right now what we're doing is not all that different from what LA is doing. We have watering day restrictions based on day of the week and the address of your home. And so they're prohibiting water use on certain days. We have hours of the day restrictions. We also have a water wasting hotline where we get quite a bit of interest in people reporting their neighbors, usually the ones they don't like too much.
Have you had to hire psychologists on this?
Right.
We're not doing these regs to meet people's needs in that way.
And so, and then we have enforcement, albeit we could probably do more, but we have patrols. We go out even on Sundays and we patrol when there should be no watering, and we have an escalating system. We issue warning letters and eventually penalties up to $500. And actually, we've been fairly successful. We've seen quite a response. Our community responds well to drought. Currently, our most recent billing data, October, November, we've seen about a 14% year-over-year reduction, which is really, really good. We're proud of that, but we still have some real challenges that we need to deal with. And we may benefit from the percentage numbers because we're a district that has a very high GPCD overall. We're a very affluent community, and Madeline pointed out well that is a major factor driving water usage. We have large variation in our properties, so we have very big ones and different styles, from tract homes to ranch style homes. We're really not right now able to accurately distinguish between efficient and inefficient. So we can certainly tell who's using the most water. That's easy to tell, but what we can't tell is of those people, who's being efficient and who's not, and that's really what matters. And so, building on that, we also really aren't providing timely feedback to our customers. Like many agencies, we bill bi-monthly, every 2 months, and so really that is way too long to give feedback to our customers on their usage. I mean, we're telling them about their summertime usage in the fall, and it's way too late for them to make changes. Mm-hmm. And then the conservation messaging, it's really not targeted. We push out the messaging, and we do our best, but we put it out to everybody. And unfortunately, the people that are really listening are a lot of times the people who are already doing a good job. And then finally, demand rebound. We see, and we've seen it in our district, we see this demand rebound after the drought. And this is a real problem. When we talk about near-term actions, we really need to think long-term. How do we minimize that drought rebound so that we don't go back to the old normal? And then if those aren't enough, on top of it all, when we don't sell enough water, we don't cover our cost. And we went through this, and we went through a period where we had a net loss, operating loss, because of low water sales and not covering our fixed costs. So our board really recognized that we needed to look at things differently. Usually when you're not achieving results, that's a good time to look at that. And so we started to look at what are we trying to accomplish. So we were trying, and we are trying to drive water use efficiency and really drive an ethic with our customers to be efficient. We want to be fair with our customers, and we recognize their needs are different and diverse. And then finally, we need revenue stability. We need to be able to know that we're going to cover our cost, and we know for certain our sales are going to fluctuate year to year. We need to know we can cover our cost, especially our fixed cost, every year, despite what our sales are. And so it's interesting, we have the same wants and needs as our customers. They want the same things. So if we look at budget-based rates, what we have now in terms of pricing, we have what's called an inclining block tier system. A lot of water agencies have them. They do encourage conservation, I believe, but we kind of have a one-size-fits-all for everybody. So everybody fits into these tiers despite the time of year and despite the size of your property and your water needs. We call the tiers a nondescript name, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4. It doesn't really mean anything to people. And we have these breakpoints that are based on some condition. So the concept of going to budget-based rates, as you likely have heard, is really to tailor a budget for every single property. Sounds challenging, but we have technology that really can help us do that. And when we do that, we can actually call the tiers what they really are, rather than Tier 1, 2, and 3. So we call them indoor water use. We call it, the green tier would be efficient, and that would just be the indoor plus the outdoor. And then we give a signal for inefficiency. So there's the inefficient tier, the excessive tier, and the wasteful tier. That really sends a message to people about when they're in those tiers, what does that mean? And then we establish the notion of a budget being the sum of the indoor and the efficient usage. And it's not unlike personal finance, where you set a budget, you monitor your expenditures, and then you try to stay within your budget. So if you look at results, by permission, IRWD gave me this slide to share. You look at the results and others who have done this. IRWD did it in the early 90s, and you look at the residential GPCD, which we've talked a lot about. You look at, they actually, in the late 80s, early 90s, they were up in almost 120 gallons per capita per day, which by some areas would be good. You look at what they've accomplished, and currently they're at less than 85. So a huge reduction, but even more importantly, if you look at this chart, what you'll see is it doesn't look like the seismograph that a lot of our agencies' GPCD looks like, with the swings before and after drought. So you see a consistent and sustained reduction. They never bumped back up above 100 GPCD since their initial decline, and I think that's really compelling that they were able to accomplish consistent results. So if we look at the questions that your board asked, as far as what more could be done, we think definitely providing support for implementing budget-based rates. There's a couple areas of potential concern. There could be some clarification with the legal ambiguities related to it. There is some litigation ongoing about budget-based rates that concern some agencies. I think there's some technical information and knowledge that could be shared with agencies that are considering it. And then also just funding for the conversion, because there is some cost, albeit it's going down, but in doing aerial photography and imaging and that kind of thing. So if we look at other recommendations aside from what we're doing, we think there's some other things to do, looking at accelerating the installation of water meters, and probably more importantly, those agencies going to volumetric billing. Perhaps there's merit to looking at that timeline. Implementing recommendations from the independent technical panel that's ongoing with DWR, and that was formed through AB 1420. Conducting workshops throughout the state that showcase technological innovations. And this might be device-based, but even now what's really exploding is the data management opportunities, and especially data management in getting that data to the customer so that they can really monitor their usage. And there's a number of companies, startup companies, and that really have some advanced tools, and I think we could showcase some of those.
We've talked about doing that.
And then perhaps an additional round of Prop 84 funds. Funding can help. We were fortunate. We received almost $500,000 in funding for our transition to budget-based rates. I think that was a very successful round of Prop 84, so that might be something to consider. In terms of land use, looking at perhaps municipalities who are siting and finding water conserving residents. So there was some focus in the legislature at looking at HOAs and some good legislation that helped to prevent that problem. That really didn't address municipalities. Probably less of a problem, but might be worth looking at. And then perhaps broadening the scope of AB 2104, which provides some protection for those folks who are installing the water efficient materials. The 2104 looked primarily at the vegetation, landscaping type things, so looking at perhaps rockscape and hardscape that's pervious, that might be worthwhile. Again, a statewide media campaign, as David mentioned, I think there's value to that in getting the message out, both about the emergency regulations and also the drought and the severity. And then extending the current emergency regulations, I think after April. Of course, monitoring the rainfall and the snowpack, but if conditions call for it, really to go ahead and extend those. As far as state board actions, I think the prohibitive actions that are in the original regulations, they really are basic things that we should all be doing. It makes sense, we think, to adopt them permanently. They don't need to be drought specific, and I can't imagine that agencies would have difficulty with that. You look at the hospitality uses, was mentioned earlier in the earlier panel, restaurants serving water on request, hotels allowing you to reuse your towels and linens, I think also would be.
At a state level, this was going to be one of my specific questions at some point, because it's kind of galling to me to see the massive glasses of ice water just appear when I know how much water it takes to wash those glasses. It's not just the water itself, but I wasn't sure whether that would be, I know it's really important for messaging. I suspect it's important in quantity, it's just wasteful, but it's helpful to have you recommend it, because I didn't know if it was overstepping state bounds. But I remember in the earlier droughts in LA, it was just automatic, and even some of these communities that have gotten the great percentages have not enacted that, and I've been tempted to make a bunch of my own phone calls to say, what's the deal on that?
We have them pretty much everywhere, all of our restaurants, and the restaurants actually have been really supportive. And it's a great message. Of course, the washing issue is the issue, not the actual water that's served. And so I'm almost done here. Looking also, maintaining the recognition of budget-based rates as an acceptable means of alternative compliance. We were really thankful to see that in the original emergency regulations, and I know it wasn't necessarily in there at the beginning, and so you really heard that comment, and we appreciate that. And then also maintaining responsibility for enforcement at the local level. We think that's important. This question a little trickier, how to compel conservation. I think definitely, with any focus here, if you have to have the proper metrics before you can really start to take action, and that's the tricky part. We think there might be merit, when you do identify what could be perceived as potentially poor performing areas, is to do a bit of a technical analysis, perhaps even calling in the help of the CUWCC to look more at the causes and potential response actions, and they might be tailored depending on the issue. And so looking at things like demand hardening, economic conditions, which we know drive demand a lot, weather patterns, resource limitations, and potentially other factors. And then as far as data collection, really what we think is looking at efficiency as a standard. So collecting data from water suppliers that really shows they're being efficient. And we have state legislation already that tells us what is efficient, both in terms of indoor use and even in outdoor use. And so really comparing to that standard, using the standard that's existing and showing how our usage is efficient for our district. Unfortunately, not all districts have that capability. We're close to being there, and we're hopeful to do that. So perhaps in the meantime, for those that can't, is looking at, as the other speakers have recommended, a longer water use trend, so you can kind of see how things have changed over time. Really important, and looking to at 20 by 2020. I mean, we're all working towards 20 by 2020, so let's see how we're doing in that context. And then looking at the other indicators, economic unemployment rates, again, strongly correlated with water demands. And then digging a little bit into the customer classes, of course, single versus multifamily, which have a huge impact on that residential GPCD, and even the residential versus non-residential. Thank you.
That's great. Are there questions? No, I was glad to hear you were taking this step, because I noticed the numbers on your GPCD, and I asked about it, and somebody said, well, they're going, which is great. Thank you. Those are all really thoughtful. The issue on additional data, it also addresses our tune-up question. How do we tune up the regulations? And do you think if we asked for all of that, people would feel it was an overload or overbearing? I mean, again, it would give a fairer picture. It's a lot of data to give, but people haven't really used the notes section that we left them to tell a full story. So
right, it's a balance. Folks, the reporting takes time and effort, so likely there'll be some pushback. I think you'll find some agencies actually will be appreciative of reporting more, but you're going to get some pushback as well because of the time and effort, and perhaps those who don't have the data. So it's always a balance in doing that.
Now, do you think that people, that agencies generally know what the residential landscape ET factors are and how their customers are not adhering to the standards that are in law?
I think they have an idea. They have an idea how they're doing overall. The challenge is we really don't, until you dig into it, you don't really know where and which customers really are the customers that are really sort of egregious in, you know, in perhaps disregard. And then on the other hand, those who have really done a good job. And so I think you look overall, you know, you can estimate your total population. Obviously, you have that data. You know your indoor water usage needs. You look at landscaped area as a whole for your service area. You can calculate those numbers without you know, huge difficulty. So you get an idea of what efficient is.
You didn't put in what I think is possibly the most important recommendation, and that is that Irvine Ranch Water District distribute all their employees to all the other water agencies in Southern California. They're starting to, I know, but I think that may be another recommendation you might want to add to your comments.
I'm a product of that.
Great. Mr. Ash.
Thank you. I apologize for my voice. I'm going to try to get through this. Yes, I'm one of those that was sent out from Irvine Ranch. I was there at the beginning at the design of that rate structure. So I'm with the IEUA. We are a wholesale agency. I want to talk about our regional and local initiatives and how we're going to address the drought, increase water efficiency, try to help our agencies' finances and their end user acceptance. I think that's something we haven't really talked about today. So we're going to try to identify the problem, how to solve for that problem, and show you that certainly the state legislation efficiency standards really help us, and show you the tools and the data that we're going to create to meet those efficiency standards. So we're an agency with 7-member agency, a wholesale agency, 7-member agencies, 850,000 population, to double over time. We've spent a tremendous amount of money on developing our local water resources. And we are 70% local supplies and 30% state water project. And we're going to significantly increase our water use efficiency and our assistance to agencies and try to exceed that 20 by 20 budget. So let me state what I think the problem is and what I've learned from Las Virgenes and all. I think it fits, but it's not just a California problem. I stole this image from the Alliance for Water Efficiency. It's a nationwide problem. And when we see declining water sales, we see those utility revenues go down. So we've asked people to save water, they have, and then we raise their rates. So that's essentially the problem. And so the solution has to be in how we recover our costs, how we send the message across on that water bill to the customer, so that we build the understanding of that customer of what we really do at a water agency. So I went to the National Public Policy Institute to find out how do you design the right kind of rate structure, and they talk about fiscal adequacy, efficiency, and fairness to all the customers. I think that's something that we certainly did at Irvine years ago, and I think that's the 3 legs, if you will, of a solid stool. I borrowed the same slide from IRWD because it's so dramatic about how, when water use efficiency was achieved, that it was held in place by a monthly water bill that gave the customer the incentive. And so I think that's actually tremendous that most people don't see, and you're right, there's that rebound in most agencies. So if we build that stool with 3 strong legs for revenue stability, water efficiency, we get user satisfaction as well, because they know we're being fair, and we've seen that in time after time in studies at that agency and others. So the state has really provided us with the standards, and it's the indoor standard for efficiency, it's the outdoor standard for efficiency, and that really equates to a water budget. And we just have to fill in a few pieces of the data. And so with that kind of standard and with that data, we can actually start to tell if a customer is efficient. This one I also stole. I do a lot of stealing from other agencies. Here's one of Dave's.
It's a family.
It's a family, it is. Here's one of his board members, actually, where the top blue line is their allocation The next dotted line is their allocation with a 20% drought budget, and the dark line is their actual use. So there's a customer we don't need to spend our conservation dollars on. They're doing a great job. We should give them a gold star. We should give them a plaque, whatever it is to keep them going. This is also one of Dave's customers and one of his board members that has a different picture.
You're not
But
going to be
once-
friends after this, I
But
don't think.
once yeah, that's right. Once they saw this picture is what made them understand the power of a water budget rate structure. And
Was
what
it
can
seeing
do for our
both
customers.
pictures or just that picture?
Well, both pictures, actually,
that
because
would tell the
4
story.
of your 5 board members were efficient at Los Rogenes. And I think that that's the case in a lot of agencies, that many of the customers are efficient. So we can build that picture when we have the data. So what I also was asked to talk about what makes a water budget rate design sustainable. From an agency standpoint, you recover your cost of service accurately, even while customers are using less water. It accurately portrays what the agency does by providing that reliable service. You've heard that before. We need to price on the bill what we do, so the customer understands. It can recognize and reward efficient users and penalize water waste. And something that is often lost in translation is a water budget rate structure also provides the retail agency with a new and independent source of funding to do more and more conservation, paid for only by those who exceed those state standards or the water efficiency guidelines. That's key. The end user, on the other hand, they see a consistent message every single billing cycle. That's why we don't see that rebound. It's based on each user's specific situation. So an end user is not going to be upset with you when you've asked them, how much water do you need? How many people do you have? What's the size of your landscape? Where do you live? We're going to give you the ET for your area, which comes straight from your state legislation. The question's been
Do
right.
you also ask about trees? I mean, some
No.
people, no?
Your state legislation doesn't boil down to
Okay.
plant type. You can certainly change those numbers in your state efficiency guidelines, but no, we don't go to that granular level. We don't need to. The state legislation doesn't need to. But we can factor in changes in weather as they happen during a billing system, because ET is downloaded into these billing systems every single day. And it places the responsibility, really, of who uses the water on them, on their efficiency. Not the agency. We don't use the water. The customer uses the water. Our job is to get it to their door safe, reliably, 24/7, 365. So I think it is a good picture. And to verify that a water budget rate structure is sustainable, UC Riverside did a study of Eastern Municipal Water District's rate structure, factoring out for economy. You can see the dotted line there where they implemented in 2009, right at the beginning of that recession. And when they factored out conservation programs, economy, weather, they found that the rate structure saved about 15 to 18% by itself in a relatively short time. But the most important piece was without any negative economic impact to the agency, with a well-designed rate structure. So on our regional and local agency initiatives, we need to collect data. We need to fill in those pieces from your state legislation. So we have a Prop 84 grant that has some significant partners. SAPA submitted the grant and it was awarded, and it is going to fly and measure the square footage of every landscape. I don't know if you could see it very well, but the maroon areas in that residential picture are actually artificial turf. Well, good imaging can actually find out if somebody's put in that artificial turf. We don't want to give them another rebate for taking out something that's green, that doesn't use any water. And it literally can calculate the square footage. Same with commercial areas. We think that there's an ability to do that. It's tougher than an individual residential site, but we think we can calculate automatically commercial landscapes as well. Then we need to add, so there's your piece of your state legislation and some of the things that we need to fill in. We need to fill in evapotranspiration rate. In the IEUA, we do not have a single CIMAS station. So we have to look differently at how we're going to provide ET across our service area. And there is private sector ET down to the square microclimate, if you will, or longitude, latitude grid. And here's Western Municipal Water District, who's used the same process, a very large service area, 550 square miles. And I'll boil down to, here's how meters are laid within that grid so that the right ET is getting to the right customer to calculate the right water budget every single day. So there's a technological thing that you can promote around the state as it's available right now. So with that data, then we can build the tools to help our agencies measure efficiency. As opposed to a GPCD number that I've heard, over again today is perhaps not the best measure. So we're going to build these tools for our customers, finding out through census data what their numbers of people. You can see in the circle there, 55 gallons per person per day, right out of state legislation, their square footage, and maybe a drought factor, whatever that drought factor is. Then we can actually rank and sort through this calculator who's efficient and who's not, so that we can focus our conservation dollars where it should go. And lastly, then we know in a given agency how many customers are efficient or meet the water budget that is in that state legislation. And in this case, 74% of this have to be a database of about 2,000 customers, already meet the state allocation. We know now who to focus on and focus our dollars and give gold stars to those others. So that's one of the tools that we will build. How else will that data be used? Obviously to build that calculator, to direct our conservation funds, to build a water budget rate modeling tool so we can give that to our agencies, let them drop in their finances, their water use, and look at a myriad of different rate structures that's going to return them their recovery of costs as well as drive conservation. And then that same data is used to populate the retail agency billing systems. So we're going to do the heavy lifting for them.
That's what
To make it possible for them to go to those water-based, allocation-based rate structures.
How much money is being spent on this?
Well, the grant has yet to be decided on how it's going to be divvied up between those 5 agencies, but we think we'll have plenty to do that. And I have 2 more slides here because I think this is the most important one. Yes, there is a cost to do this, but I've seen over and over again that there's a far greater cost to not changing. It's both economic, environmental, and political. And I'll use Las Verdes as an example. Once we dove into the numbers with David, their cost to move to water budget rates is about 10% of the cost that they have gone into reserves to pull out to balance budget. Is that about right? So their payback time will be 1 quarter, maybe 1/2 of a year to create the water budget rate structure. Things are changing around us all the time, so we have to change with that. And change, I know, is hard. It has its own law, the law of diffusion, why change is hard. So we've got to get to a tipping point, and I think that's where your help comes in to help us push agencies to something that both David and I have found doesn't hurt. In fact, it's good for the agency, it's good for the customer, and I'll leave you with one example. There's a very small agency in San Bernardino County, East Valley Water District. They are going through the process right now, and the story that they're going to be able to tell for bringing that water to their customer's door each day is it's going to cost that infrastructure, that ability to get that water 24/7, 365, costs about $1 a day, and the water itself costs about 0.2 of a penny per gallon. That's the good story. And when the customer service people saw that story, they said, "Yeah, we could sell that. That makes sense." So. Leading on to our recommendations, we'd like to see you expand board support for allocation-based rates as an alternative compliance mechanism, as you described in your July emergency regulations. Be clear about that state efficiency standards. That really is a standard. Perhaps not GBCD, perhaps what you already have in state law. It incentivizes market-based approach. We see more passive conservation in agencies that have water budget rates, and that's great for agencies. We don't have to pay for that, that conservation. Perhaps requiring agencies to report that percentage of users who are meeting state water budgets. It's going to take data, but that's where we need to go. I've heard it earlier today, Tim mentioned it. You can't manage what you can't measure. So our grant is going to try to measure all the pieces we need so that we can measure effectively and target our conservation dollars. And then I've heard it again and again, conduct statewide training on the technologies that are available right now that we're going to start using at the first of the year in this SWRCB grant. So with that, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, very thoughtful.
So if we added a data reporting category based on the ET and on the indoor water use, are water agencies able to supply that information? Right now, they can report how much water they're selling. That's what we ask for. And we actually, or they, I think, do the calculation on the gallons per capita per day. But do they all know how their folks are doing with indoor water use? And can they report that? And can they report their outdoor water use based on ET?
I would say generally no. The agencies with water budget rate structures absolutely can.
Right, they're not many.
But they can't without that data. Exactly right. So helping agencies get to that data point so that you have a number that means something and that you can really use would be our recommendation.
Right, and there are different tools to ponder for that. One is there any way to use the water bond funding, talking to our colleagues at DWR to assist with this? It certainly seems like it would fit within the pie, but the guidance has to be written. Can we use SRF dollars for it? I suspect we can. And then there are leveraging incentives. What else? So in any event, what are the suite of tools, in addition to holding workshops and just illuminating the issue? I do think, because pricing is more than about the price signal, it's also about this fiscal solvency, and there's a lot of data out there to show that it can really work and be a win-win, and not, even though it costs something, not doing it has a pretty tremendous cost as well as just that paralysis. And there's a book I read recently that referred to a period of time as the age of dithering, and it's sort of, there's a sense of dithering and shouldn't we, that you can get over if you just get to one of these structures.
Irvine Ranch Water District, after 5 years, surveyed customers and asked them two key questions. Do you understand the rate structure? 85% said yes. Do you think it's fair? 85% said yes.
Nice.
And Western Municipal did a similar survey before implementing water budget rates. 83% got the concept. They said yes, rewarding efficiency and penalizing water waste is exactly what we should do. So it gave our board of directors the confidence to move forward. Customers get it. Now we've got to give the tools and the data to the agencies to implement, and then you build that customer satisfaction as well, and defensibility and transparency of what you do and how you do, and a linkage between the state legislation and what actually goes out in the water bill.
I find this movement from a relative, grading on a curve approach that we have now to a more of an absolute or, defined on state efficiency standards to be a compelling move. But as we've discussed, there's a lot that goes into getting there as far as the information to be available. I asked this question about to an agency in the Bay Area, why haven't you gone to allocation-based rates? And part of the tension there was that there were different ET zones within the jurisdictional boundary. So there was a customer acceptance challenge that certain areas that are hotter and drier would get a greater allocation based on the ET there versus the coastal side. And what advice would you have to an agency like that and strategies to try to get customer acceptance of what on first blush seems like an inequitable allocation of water?
There's an agency right here that has that problem.
So I think, when you say it's inequitable, I think actually it is. I mean, those people who are in that hotter microclimate, they need more water to support their plants and vegetation. So, you can argue the other way. I think actually the value of the system is it recognizes the differences. In our service area, we have, the Santa Monica Mountains, where we have huge different climate zones. Even rainfall can fluctuate from, 3/4 of an inch, between areas within the district. And so we need to recognize that the needs are very different. I think that's one of the values of this system. One thing on the information side, the metering issue is an important one because you need that data on usage. And really, also what we're looking at is going to monthly billing. And that's a big change. And perhaps in the future, even AMI, AMR deployment, we have currently a partial deployment. To
Meaning
get that
more
data
real time.
more quickly, real time, and get that to customers. And that's, one of the big hurdles that probably some agencies might face.
I can answer your question a little bit differently. Molten Miguel Water District stretches from coastal to inland, lots of hills and valleys. And That was a question that came up first in the public hearings from customers. How do you know what the weather is in my area? It's hotter here, or I have more wind. And they have a large board in their boardroom that has their service area and those grid lines I showed you laid across, and they showed them exactly where their house was, and they get the weather for that location every single day. And so the credibility of the agency of how hard they worked or how smart they were and the science that they used really feeds into that comfort zone and the comfort level for the customer.
I think so, and also rooting it back in the state legislation, which is
That's
based on
interesting.
that.
It is your state legislation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
have to create it.
We don't have to come up with it.
Right.
But like you say, the homework has to be done.
Right.
The agency has to map it and defend it.
And so in our SOPA grant, we're going to try to build some of these tools and then perhaps talk to the state board about how we can utilize these tools all over the state.
Great, great. Perfect. Other questions? Great. Mr. Brill.
Morning, Madam Chair, other fellow board members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share our perspective. I'm going to touch on a few of the points that have been brought up already, but I'm going to kind of focus, spend my time focusing on two areas that are maybe a little bit different and a little bit from a little different perspective. Mojave Water Agency is a wholesale agency. We're not retail, so we don't have the direct billing tie to customers that my other fellow panelists have. So I'm going to be talking about primarily focus on outdoor landscaping and a cultural shift that I think is occurring in our service area, and kind of how that relates to our discussion today. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of other activities going on: indoor use, toilets, measurements, billing, rate-based, all that. But I'm going to touch on the outdoor landscaping and the cultural changes, and really kind of running on that theme of trying to enhance that partnership we have with our citizens, our Joe and Jane citizens, as I refer to them. Just a little bit about us. Yeah, we cover a relatively large area. We are desert. We get very little rainfall. As I left this morning, for a very brief moment, I was cursing as I walked out the door and entered into a heavy rain, but just for a very moment, and then
You caught yourself like
yes,
a true
I did
water
catch
agency
myself,
manager.
and then after that microsecond, I said, I'm very thankful that we're now receiving some much-needed rain. We are in a relatively low-income area. Some of the pockets of some of the cities like Apple Valley and Victorville are outside of that area, but a large service area, and again, relatively low income, just to kind of get a little flavor. Talk a little bit about changing the culture. We first started really in earnest around in the 2000s. This also coincided with the beginnings of our first integrated regional water management plan. We began really our first effort in 2001 in partnership with the Department of Water Resources, and we started looking at our portfolio of actions, and obviously conservation was one very key element in that portfolio. And as a result of that, there has been a big emphasis on conservation, again, on many different fronts, and there has been a fair amount of movement on this. The graph in front of you here is a little bit busy, but it shows for the municipal water use. The blue is actually water use. The red is the calculated per capita. One of the very first things we did when we started working on conservation, we formed a regional group that we referred to as the Alliance for Water Awareness and Conservation, basically a partnership with all the cities, water districts, all the frontline folks that we just heard from. And we set a goal of 20% by 2020. This was actually before the state came out with their 20 by 20. We also thought it was a kind of a snappy goal. And we also began our efforts to try to measure our progress. At the time, we had no means of measuring, identifying a goal and measuring performance against that goal. So there has been a fair amount of movement. If you do the math, that's in the per capita use, that's about a 37% decline in per capita use. So yeah, we're not done. And we measured against our goal. We revised our goal. But prior to the drought, and I would say still including in the drought, our primary goal is driven by sustainability. Water use efficiency certainly helps. The green bar there is a theoretical water savings that we would have had if that per capita number of 271 stayed at 271, and you calculated that against the population as it increased by 44% over the same time period. it would have required us to need an additional 50,000 acre-feet. That effectively would have been 50,000 acre-foot additional demand on the State Water Project. The way our system is set up is that all of the natural safe field of the groundwater basin is all fully allocated, it's all fully been used, and basically any use above that is mitigated by imported water coming in. So effectively that would have been a direct pressure on the State Water Project system. So there's ancillary benefits as well. This was an interesting story that I participated in and I watched unfold. Back in 2000, I first came to the agency in 2000, and when I first got there, not surprisingly, we looked at a lot of the landscape ordinance, and they actually were geared to require turf. A minimum amount, it was like 30–40%, you had to have turf. And when we
For
first
many
started,
people, it is a surrogate for civilization. It harkens back to England as the mother country, even though this much of the country
I had heard that
is
story.
for whom it's the mother country. It's actually not most of our mother country,
Yes,
but it's just a mindset.
it's in our DNA, a small part.
Don't forget Frederick Olmsted.
Yeah, I know. I love the guy,
Legacy.
but
We all want our little kingdom. I think that's kind of where it came from. Anyways, I first got there in 2000. We hired one of our conservation specialists, whatever you want to call him, someone that was focused on conservation. He first came to me and said, "We've got to change this." And I said, "You're nuts. Yeah, we will change it, but it will happen slowly." So the time progressed. We formed this Alliance for Water Awareness and Conservation. A dialogue starting to emerge. There was a dialogue all throughout our service area. There was one champion over in the city of Victorville that kind of took this on as a charge and really kind of helped move the bar, started adopting landscape ordinances. All of the cities followed suit. Actually, they did it in a time prior to the state the state model landscape ordinance went into effect. And those landscape ordinances are still in effect today, and they are significantly more aggressive than what's in the state model on turf restrictions. So again, it was kind of interesting to watch this paradigm move, albeit slowly but relatively rapidly, and to see the culture beginning to change over time. And part of the movement to facilitate that was obviously a bit like a lot of other my colleagues have a Cash for Grass program. We started this in 2008, and has been widely successful. In our area, there's been about 7 million square feet of turf removed. We have a population served overall, just under 500,000 people. And we've done this so far offering 50 cents a square foot. I think we're starting to see we're starting to see some of our numbers diminish off, and we're working to try to bump that up a little bit. But another thing that I find interesting is the average project is about 1,800 square feet removed. And that's indicative of the general lot sizes that we have. I mean, they're relatively large lots. People move up there to get out cheap land. So in one city has an ordinance that requires minimum half-acre lots for new development. So you have these larger lots and this culture of, and sometimes we have a saying that people from Orange County are bringing the Orange County with them, and with that is I've got to have my lawn and I've got to fill my half-acre with lawn. Well, that's rapidly changing. And these are all the installations over just the urban area. A little under 4,000 installation. The circles are weighted. And there was an interesting little phenomenon that occurred here that we realized a couple of years ago. When we started zooming into neighborhoods, we were seeing clusters.
sure, people see their neighbors, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It became kind of hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Another little anecdotal story that I like to tell occurred one day when my wife and I were walking through the neighborhood, and one of our neighbors just finished an install of a Cash for Grass program, and actually she was painting her shutters. And I walked by and kind of said, "Hey, nice job," gave her the thumbs up, and just a smile from ear to ear. I mean, she was genuinely proud of what she was doing, what she had done with, or what they had done with their house, and And it wasn't a mandate, it was an encouragement, and it really was a pride thing. And so that was kind of an indicator that, hey, something's going on here. Something's starting to change where this isn't occurring because we have to, this is occurring because we want to, and then part of the right thing to do as well. So that's a theme I'm going to come back to in just a moment. The other thing I've noticed in my travels through our service area as I get out and attend community meetings, and we have various programs at our agency where we invite the community, the Joe and Janes, to come in, is they're starting to get it. And when I say get it, they're starting to get the underlying reasons of why we're doing what we're doing. As I'll get to in a moment, the declaration of the state board actually had a very big part in that. That made a lot of news in our area. The other thing I'm picking up on, and this was actually at a community meeting where we attended, where one of our we attended in partnership with one of our purveyors, where they were getting to roll out their water use restrictions as a result of the order, and highly controversial. It was interesting. It was controversial not because they were being required to do it, it was controversial because it was being prescribed in the manner in which they had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were saying, it's okay, we get it, but we don't like being told what to do. Give us the feedback of how we're doing, give us the metrics of where we need to go, and allow us at least a partial means to get there. And so I think the budget raise, I think that's a great idea, and I'm not sure that's been really rolled out in our area yet. But the other thing I find intriguing is some of these new software tools that are coming out that take advantage of some of the automatic metering, some of the data collection, and actually post in your water bill your water score. I kind of like it to, you've heard the commercial, what's your sleep number? Mm-hmm. Why not have what's your water number and have that be part of a tabletop discussion around the dinner table, around the bar, or wherever you go, and everybody knows their number, and they know their number with respect to their peers. They know their number with respect to averages, and they know their number with respect to some of the more higher conservation people in their neighborhood. I think that could be a really valuable tool. Okay, just to kind of bounce down through some of the actions. As I mentioned earlier, your resolution to add urgency, big thumbs up. That created an opportunity for messaging, and I think that was really valuable. The runoff from landscape, the only reason I put question marks here is kind of like we're already doing it. So it's not that it was bad, it's just that and it's hard to have the metrics to support this, but it just doesn't seem like it has had that impact because it's kind of already there. Same thing with car washing, cleaning landscape and fountains. I mean, good things, they're not bad things to do, just have they had a meaningful impact? Not quite sure.
Symbolic.
Pardon?
Symbolic as
Yes,
much as anything.
Absolutely. Implementing drought plans, again, I think that also helped create an opportunity for a narrative. I think that had very positive impacts. The authority to fine, only a thumbs down because this has created a lot of confusion. And maybe this is an initial part of the discussion that has to occur, but some water districts aren't cities. They don't have the police powers. Some water districts don't have a city. They don't even have the opportunity for a police power. Some cities also have water, and they have two different departments that have to coordinate. So, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but just out of the blocks, it's I'm not sure how really effective that has been in our area. Now, the launching of four thumbs up. This has been huge. This has changed the narrative. This has changed the narrative to an imperfect set of metrics, but nevertheless a set of metrics that we're now looking to compare ourselves, maybe with others, and with ourselves as well. So leading to the recommendation, they all kind of geared towards this culture change, if you will. We talked earlier about trying to normalize data. There's huge challenges there to do that, but I think that moving in that direction would be valuable. They encourage the use of data to measure local performance and to do that both for benchmarking and for trends. Possibly an enhanced portal. I think I saw some stuff today that was interesting.
You just talked to the man right behind you,
There you
because
go.
he's the
An
data
enhanced portal
guy.
for community access. I mean, that's great for workshops, but in my opinion, the greatest value is in the hands of Joe and Jane. If we can get that in their hands to allow them the opportunity to see, okay, how am I doing? How is our community doing? And I think that would really help in changing behavior. As we talked about in historical context and the evaluations, you saw our per capita leveling off. We're taking a close look at that. We're not sure exactly why that is. It could be weather-based. I don't think it's demand hardening. I think we still have a ways to go, even though we've seen significant increase or decrease in per capita use. And then also support investments in local programs that yield long-term behavioral changes. And I think we've heard that a number of times today too. I mean, it's okay to utilize the drought, but if that's the sole messaging, then when the drought's over, okay, we're good now, right? And then everybody kind of goes back to kind of the new green is the brown, or whatever that saying is. I mean, if that's
Gold is the new green.
yeah, now. If the goal is to brown your lawn until the drought's over, then the lawn's going to get green back up. So and certainly especially in a groundwater basin that's subject to pressures, our focus is probably a little more heavily centered on long-term sustainability. We're in a little bit better position to weather some of these fluctuations in drought because we're primarily groundwater dependent, but nevertheless, I think the messaging needs to be long-lasting and sustainable and really changing behavior. So with that, again, thank you for the opportunity to provide a perspective, and I'll certainly be open to questions at the appropriate time.
This would be the appropriate time.
Yeah, I have a question. So on your citizens getting ready to become partners, that they don't want to be told what to do. But then on that same slide, you've got here, they want to customize their response, and then, the software tools. So are you suggesting flexibility such that these other tools could replace prescribed, standards? And if so, how could you show compliance using those tools?
Well, I think the concept is kind of similar to the budget-based, is that you have a target. I guess in the rates you have a penalty, and you know where you are. But at the other hand, the tools I think that I'm referring to are availability of landscapers, availability of different types of plant selections, availability of alternatives, availability of controllers, and a whole suite of additional tools. And again, I'm not emphasizing, I guess, there shouldn't be a hammer, but that shouldn't be our primary tool in the toolbox.
All right, that was great. Thank you all for the very thoughtful presentations. And one of you all focused on things that were primarily longer term, although, David, you did talk about a number of the things that are yielding real water quickly. I think holding this balance between the fact that we are in a water shortage, I'll call it a water shortage to make George Skelton happy, because I want to do that, which is just to say that, even though it's raining right now, we're in a big hole from our snowpack and reservoir perspective, which is something, really is only the expert public understands. It'd be great to have the full-on public be able to understand that if we had the kind of communication capacity that, for example, the Australians brought to bear. Year 6, mind you, not now in the process. So we have this short-term challenge in addition to wanting to do long-term permanent change. If each of you were gonna, and you don't all have to answer, but if you had one additional thing that we could do in the short run, because we also have to deal with the short run, because particularly if we're looking at, I don't know what the storage levels are gonna be next week after these rains, but as we talked about earlier, having 1 to 2 years left in storage in large municipal areas, both north and south, doesn't help me sleep at night. So there's still a need for there to be some pretty significant short-term efforts. Is there anything that we should be doing as we think about either tuning up our regs, finding funding sources, considering waste and unreasonable use, all the kinds of tools that we have that hasn't been mentioned today or has been mentioned today that you think we should keep front of mind?
I'll take a first shot at that. I think it's the expansion of what's working, I think, the best right now, and that's your data program.
Okay.
And not just data, I'm referring to knowledge. And that there was an attempt to try to turn, and I think a successful attempt to turn data into knowledge today. But getting that out, getting it accessible, getting it in a way where people can see it in a very timely manner, and being able to disseminate that in the community. Again, there's many other actions, but to me, that has been probably the greatest, that has provided the greatest value, I think, from our perspective, and I think that there's room for expansion of that.
Great.
And getting back to the standards that are in law right now, the indoor standards and the outdoor standards with ET, is that the sort of information that you think local Janes and Joes would want?
I think eventually, yes. Initially, it's just as simple as how are we benchmarking against other communities, and how do we benchmark against ourselves as a function of time? I mean, ultimately go there, but I mean, you guys are collecting that information now. It kind of seems, again, I'm not an expert in accessing the portal and everything, but it seems like our best information is actually coming from the press, where they're digging into databases and they're doing their own comparisons. I think if we can preempt that effort in conjunction with the folks that are providing the data and make it meaningful, I think there's a great opportunity there.
So we should just post more of our data on a more granular level and let people just go with the data as a starter, but we should also ask for more data.
Well, again, I'm making the differential between data and knowledge.
Right.
I mean, data is one thing, and it's hard for the Joe and Janes to consume data. I mean, if that can be made into knowledge, the meaningful knowledge and the interpretation of that, that's one step further that you can do because you have it.
Right. It's good advice.
Just to throw my 2 cents in, I think, just not to sound redundant, but I think moving toward residential GPCD calculations would be valuable statewide, and moving off the idea of regional looks and more, maybe if you want to get more granular.
Agency level, yeah.
Agency
I agree.
looks would be helpful. And if you want to try to make an impact in the near term, I think public messaging is really key, because behavior does get changed by public messaging, and that's something that you can do in the short term will really have a big impact. I think the other thing that you might think about doing is just collecting data on outdoor watering, and just what are people doing as far as what are they allowing in their service area on outdoor watering, and you can get as granular as you want to get on number of days and minutes per station. I mean, if I was to say, well, you can water 3 days a week, but you can water 24 hours a day during those 3 days a week,
right.
That doesn't really mean much. So I think having that, people collect that data, and I think it will be helpful for people to see.
Great. Anything else from you two? Yeah, we've been trying to do the highlights.
Thank you. It helps everyone else who's looking and perhaps considering different options. It helps them to kind of see how are other people dealing with this, and are these things that we might be able to do. So I think getting that profiling out, perhaps elevating it a bit to kind of recognize that work. And then on the data portal, maybe making it a little bit easier to manipulate the data. It's in, I think, an Excel format now, so you have to be kind of tech savvy a little bit, so there might be some opportunities to make the data a little more easy to digest.
And so on profiling, you're suggesting that we sort of tell the story about what happened in that community?
Right, exactly, and I think you've already done this,
Yeah.
But even maybe taking it a little further and kind of drilling in on different approaches and some of the different measures that they've taken to achieve the results. And I think it does a couple things. It recognizes those agencies, but also the rest who are watching and really trying to figure out, what's right for us. They can kind of look to another agency and then even contact them to, kind of pattern.
Great,
Well, I talked about all the data we're going to
yeah,
collect.
yeah.
A big portion of that SOPA grant is going to take advantage of all this notoriety about taking turf out. And that's going to take up a big part of that grant. That's why we might need more help to create those tools that any agency can use. But so we want to do it, everything at the same time here while we have the opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate the time, not just today, obviously, but all the effort that you've been putting in over the months and the years and the decades in some cases. So thank you. We're going to move to public comment. This has been incredibly useful, and I know it will be equally useful as we hear from the public. We have quite a few speakers, so we're going to have to move to 3 minutes. We have found, frankly, the whole purpose of this is to give us ideas, what to think about, what to consider. Staff will then go back and talk with each of us, but also work on compiling a series of options and recommendations for our next steps, and we'll figure out how to move forward quickly. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully all of you are still here, I'm hoping. And our first speaker is Joe Berg from the Municipal Water District of Orange County. Followed by, thank you, Dr. Tom Williams, Citizens Coalition for a Safe Community.
Okay.
Hello.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to share some comments with you this afternoon. I'm Joe Berg, Water Use Efficiency Programs, Water District of Orange County, and we've prepared a comment letter and have submitted that. I don't want to go through all of it, but just through some of the highlights. Clearly, there are some themes forming in the discussion that we've had earlier today, and I don't want to beat those to death anymore, but there's a few additions I'd like to add to that. So efficiency targets, I think, is a great way to help levelize the playing field across the state. The existing metrics that have been developed through the landscape ordinances and through SBX 7 for indoor water use are a great starting point for that. What really, I think a key area that the state board can assist all agencies throughout the state is in modeling what SOPA is about to do and what Orange County has done in the past with the infrared aerial imagery is a key component of that effort because it allows us to differentiate between types of plant material, whether it's an irrigated plant material or if it's natural vegetation, synthetic turf we learned earlier, pool surface, trees and shrubs versus ground cover. So that's critically important information. In the study that we've done in the past, the elevation is another very important part, and that's what the LIDAR component gets you. On a slope, you can have up to a 29% error if you don't account for slope. So having that component in there is very, very important, especially if you're going to tie your efficiency target to your rate structure. What MODOC is advocating for is the decision on rates should be a local decision, and technical assistance could be provided by the state board. That could be modeled after what MODOC did in the last drought where we were awarded a grant. We worked with about 12 of our retail agencies to do area measurements, to do Prop 218 analysis, to do rate design work. Of the 12 agencies, 4 have implemented budget-based tiered rates since that time, and we have 2 or 3 that are still working in that direction that we're confident that we'll get there. The efficiency target concept can be applied at the individual customer level. I would recommend starting out on residential, or it can be applied at the water agency level, so that's something to consider. The investment in the area measurements and the infrared imagery is not something that should be done once, but it should be done on a regular basis so that we can monitor and see the changes in our urban landscapes over time. I believe that information will be very, very helpful for DWR in preparing the state water plan as well.
Mm-hmm. Does this include the SIMA system? Is that what
Yes.
the LiDAR is connected to the SIMUS, or how does that work?
It's another necessary data set, but it's separate from the LiDAR and the infrared imagery. The weather data is what you need on an ongoing basis to calculate the budget or the efficiency target for the consumer.
Okay.
And my last comment is quickly that I haven't heard yet is to assist with expanding recycled water systems. Anytime you can get a new customer connected, it's 100% savings.
We're with you.
And stormwater systems.
Great. Dr. Tom Williams, followed by Fiona Sanchez. Oh, Dr. Williams.
Good afternoon. First question, can we get an extension on written comments being delivered to the board? Since we've had
It's not like it's not like we're doing a petition or anything, sure.
Okay.
We'll take all the help we can get whenever we
Okay,
can get it.
a quote from a famous gentleman. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. 70 years ago, I was recycling cans, and we conserved our water because we didn't have any in Kansas during the summer. So we had to conserve. 40 years ago, in Marin County, our client said, can you give us a better project? i.e., they were restricted by Marin County to so many gallons per unit. We got them 25% more units with the same water. In analog time, nowadays, all of these are available online. Rates are the issue. If it doesn't make economic sense, nobody will do it. The rich are richer these days than the poor were. And we have a problem of, quotes, environmental justice. Oh, by the way, we consume 50 gallons per person per day, not 92 averaged over the city of Los Angeles. And we have permeable pavement, and we have mulch, and we have native plants, and the sage are the best ones for around here. And we do that on 50 gallons per person per day. So there are many things. A key important conservation issue will be gray water, and getting gray water really implemented, because that's something that we have every day. We get the rains, sometimes. We get gray water every day. So if you want to conserve water, gray water on-site source, go to the source. So we have several things. We'll be submitting them in written correspondence from both Citizens Coalition and from Sierra Club Water Committee. But another one, rates. I was very happy that brought up rates. But I might say, to whom? Here's one that nobody has mentioned before. You have two things now that we didn't have 40 and 70 years ago. You have media. Why isn't this presentation live online?
It is. People have been watching, hundreds, apparently.
But all I'm saying is, if we would have known about it in a more timely fashion, and if it was on my, say, line, that would be great. And remember, who are the people that will be here 40 years from now? The children. Preschool. Have your preschool, your school age, and maybe water districts should have interns from high schools and from first 2 years in college. All of these programs have been around for a long time. Just get it done.
Thank you. Next, Fiona Sanchez from the Irvine Ranch Water District, followed by Drew Atwater from the Molten Eagle Water District. Hello.
Hi, good morning. So yeah, I am one of the people still left at Irvine Ranch Water District unless something happened while I've been here. So I would like to thank the State Board for taking a very positive step when it did recognize the allocation-based rate structures in the initial round of the emergency drought regs. And I think you've heard from others that it has been a very positive experience from us, not only short-term conservation, but really long-term sustained conservation. So we did provide a comment letter. I'm not going to go into all the details, but some of the highlights is that we would like to see that whatever future policies are adopted continue to support that and potentially even provide some credit for agencies that may be considering transitioning to this rate structure, as you maybe consider additional mandatory regulations. Another thing could be to assist agencies in helping tackle both perceived implementation obstacles as well as maybe some of the real costs. And we did include in our comment letter what some of those are, as well as some proposed solutions. For example, DWR through the CIMIS, we actually partnered with through a grant, and DWR provides free ET data throughout the state at a 2 square kilometer resolution through a state grant that was provided a couple of years ago. So that data is accessible to agencies to implement this kind of rate structure. Aerial imagery can be really expensive. I will say right now that IRWD does not have aerial imagery tied to parcels, and we've been very effective at implementing this type of rate structure. So there are other cost-effective ways to implement, and perhaps maybe convening an advisory group of agencies that have either implemented or are going through the process of implementing. Maybe we could provide some additional assistance and maybe even a how-to guide for that. I think the benefit of this rate structure, you heard a little bit about legal issues. The foundation of this rate structure, as people have mentioned, are the standards, and it's really tied to reasonable use and back to Article 10, and that's the beauty of it. And so I think we really want to encourage people to use water in a reasonable way, and when you waste, we want to let you know. Another thing, you heard a lot about system loss and leak detection. Perhaps, as others have mentioned, the state could consider encouraging that, and also potentially providing either grants or state revolving loan funds for agencies to implement system audits, and if they have identified issues with aging infrastructure, maybe low-cost loans for those repairs. We would like to continue to advocate for the expanded use of recycled water and continuing to look for opportunities where regulations could be clarified to make sure as agencies are able to maintain storage of recycled water so they can meet demands rather than having to meet those demands through potable supplies. And then finally, in our comment letter, we did include a lot of information about metrics. A lot of that you've heard today, but we provided quite a few suggestions for maybe how you might measure that in terms of both identifying GPCD, identifying ET, and the reasonableness of the GPCD measures for agencies who perhaps are poor performers, and possibly even looking, when you identify those, perhaps partnering with organizations such as the California Urban Water Conservation Council that might be able to offer technical assistance and also provide a further assessment of truly is that agency a poor performer, or are there other factors that may result in it having a high GPCD. So those are a summary of our comments. IRWD is happy to help the state board in any way that we can, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the leadership your agency's shown. Drew Atwater, Molten Miguel Water District, followed by Tim Worley from the California-Nevada section of the AWWA.
Thanks so much for making the trek down to Southern California. I wanted to thank the board again for creating this exemption for the water budget rate structures and allowing the district to use that. We're finalizing our current rate study and looking at reducing our indoor and outdoor allocation factors and trying to continue to refine the rate structure moving forward to use it as a demand management tool into the future. And also just because that's more of a long-term vision, I think that's, so getting back to the other half in terms of short-term reactions to immediate need for conservation, we're using the water budget rate structure to penalize customers who are above allocations in a drought, and creating a water shortage contingency plan that uses rates in kind of a short-term reaction. And I think that that's something that would maybe a lot of water, one of the panelists today made a comment about how not every water agency has a drought rate structure. So when you implement, for instance, your reduce the allowable days of irrigation, you then lower revenues, and then you have to raise rates, and you get into kind of this loop of penalizing people for conserving. But then if you separate that, so you have some sort of a penalty or something like that along those lines, so that it's not like your normal rate. So you're penalizing people for a short-term reaction to this. I think that helps. And it's the biggest issue is that a lot of agencies try to create policies in reaction to a drought, as opposed to maybe planning ahead. And a lot of the times, the information required takes. You need to think about it before you're in a drought in order to have the best policy in place at the time of drought. And so I think that the more that the state could provide guidelines on getting that data, like LiDAR imaging for the whole state, so that everyone had availability on creating kind of water use efficiency targets to look at how, so we can get into some metrics because it's hard to create a good policy in a vacuum of information. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest areas, is just creating standardization of data on outdoor irrigation. The SIMA stations, as both Fiona and Joe said, that the spatial data is available currently, and so you could tie that to the data currently collected to do some comparisons, because it's all there right now. And with the federal census, the population estimates are all available too, so you can get kind of at least some preliminary estimates on water use efficiency, and then refine that as you get landscape area. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Sorry, that is so annoying. If that woke me up, I would just have, there's a reason why they changed alarms from that, but maybe that's why they have it that way. Tim Worley, nice that you joined us. And followed by Bill McDonald from MWD.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm glad to join you. As you know, AWWA has tremendous knowledge resources by tapping into the knowledge of our members throughout the country and North America, really. I was gratified to hear others suggest some of our products, some of those knowledge resources.
You were up there.
The
M36,
M36.
M36?
We also have a
It
drought
sounds like a
manual,
weapon,
M60.
though. I hate to say it. Or a
which
noisemaker, an M36.
I think after this experience that we've been through, probably our drought manual will need to be updated, which will again benefit from the experience here in California. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I did not think would be mentioned, and they haven't been so far. I'd like to recommend that you consider moving toward a more mandatory certification and training of water conservation personnel. We've had, since 2008, we developed a certification through the rigorous process that we go through to actually create a certification. But it's not been as widely adopted as we might have hoped. And I think that along with that, certainly the training that is necessary, that continuing education is an important feature. Good training can also probably help in good data collection, which has been a subject throughout today. Now, the one thing I can't assure you is that certification or training will produce short-term results, the water savings that are so important right now. But I think if we could work together on doing some comparison of those agencies with certified personnel to those without, it might help us understand how effective it could be. And if it's not as effective as it might be, then perhaps there are ways we can work together to improve that. One thing that I would suggest as a short-term measure, you asked others about what one thing that they would suggest, and it's been mentioned before, but I think the water audit of system losses is something the board could really require of agencies. And for our members,
It would help if we help pay for it. too, so.
But what was mentioned was the water audit in Georgia, the water audit plus a look back at how effective it was, as I recall.
Right, I believe so. And I'm not familiar
And I
with
think
Georgia.
I think AWWA's new water audit approach has some of those additions.
Yeah, and for members, that the software is free, a free download from the awwa.org website. So maybe you should just encourage every
Somebody to go to
agency
your
be a member
website?
of AWWA.
There you go.
Thank you for the time and for your good work on this.
Thank you as well. Bill McDonald, followed from MWD, followed by Maria Gutzeit. Hi.
Thank you.
Thanks
Good
for the room.
afternoon. I'm Bill McDonald, and I'm the Water Use Efficiency Manager here at the Metropolitan Water District, and about 4 hours late, but I do want to welcome you to officially welcome you to Metropolitan and appreciate you coming here. Couple of comments. First off is that Metropolitan's official comments are part of the cool letter, so you'll see them in there. There isn't a specific Metropolitan. But I did want to touch on a couple of things today, one being we talked about permanent water conservation, and then Fran talked about technology. On the permanent water conservation side, Metropolitan and our member agencies have seen, as you've seen, I can't even, like, basically a tenfold increase in our conservation rebates. We currently have almost $190 million in requests for incentives. And that's for hard technology that will be in for a long time. And that's unprecedented. We're halfway through the year. It was only 6 months. A lot of that, too, is in landscaping, as you know. And that represents about 60 million square feet of landscaping to be removed. And that's, again, only in the first 6 months. So a lot of these landscape projects that we're seeing with, in our service area, even on the residential side, they're taking 6 months to a year to complete. And then as the rain comes, so we're going to see we won't see a lot of these water savings until maybe a year from now. Because a lot of our customers, in fact, on my cell phone today, extensions, extensions, extensions. The rain, contractor, you ever watch To Catch a Contractor? Contractors got to pick a new one. So we're giving them a lot of extensions. So
We're not going to tackle that issue.
yeah, but so the down here and I see that permanent landscape change is going to have a huge impact. It's not, you won't see it today. You may not even see it in May or June, but it's going to happen, and it's going to be for a long time. And the second thing is, Fran talked about technology, getting new technology out here. You mentioned dual flush toilets. And dual flush toilets are great. They were the rage 10 years ago, 1.6 and 0.8. Now, everything is 0.8, or a lot of things are 0.8. But as far as what Metropolitan's done is about 15 years ago, Fran was part of the initiation, is we actually have a program called the Innovative Conservation Program, where we encourage people to send us their new ideas. We have a grant program, and we're looking for new ideas. So in 2015, anybody that's interested in helping fund that program, as we last year got funding from Southern Nevada and Central Arizona, so it's actually become multi-state, because everybody, not just California, is looking for new technologies. So what we do is anybody can apply. We fund the ones that do the best, and then we'll get new technologies out of that, and then hopefully that leads to projects that will be rebated. And again, thank you for your time, and welcome to Metropolitan, and hope you guys come back.
Thank you very much.
And this is also a place where we can, when we get contacted by people who have this great new idea that's going to save millions of gallons of water, we can send them to the program, to the MET program, and let them get sorted through.
That's great. Maria, and Goodside, followed by Liz Crossan from the LA Waterkeeper.
Thank you, and thank you for coming down to LA. I am a Water District Director for New Hall County Water District. I've been on the board for 11 years now. I'm also a chemical engineer. And I want to plug our agency a little bit. We're rolling out a water budget billing system. In January, our customers will see a customized water budget. We also have an actively funded groundwater cleanup program, and our area has a projected 3-year supply without conservation because of the investments we've done in banking. I want to talk about a few different things that have not been mentioned. First of all, I want to make sure that as a state, we're going to solve the right problem. Ag is 80% of the water use in the state. Urban is 20%. We saw the number on the South Coast figures being 56% of urban. That's 11% of the state. If we all do fabulous and hit our 20%, that's 4% of the state supply. Asking ag to save only 5% would save the same amount of water. So I want to make sure that it's not all on urban, that we all
It's definitely not. We
need to work on all the
hundreds of
issues.
thousands of acres fallowed. Ag has been hit very hard by this drought.
Other considerations for urban, I totally agree with the suggestions to focus on residential use, not per capita use. Because you have areas that have bottling plants, entertainment industry. Our area has a lot of parks and recreation, which we're really proud of for our kids, but that is turf. You can't play soccer on Rosemary, much as people might try. Also, people need to understand that this does help our community, but it's not helping areas that we're not connected to. So again, we need the statewide focus. I also want to mention, I would like to see data on these costs, because it does feel like it's a lot on the homeowners. I live in a very modest 1960s ranch house. I was quoted $27,000 for irrigation retrofits, $20,000 for a gray water system, a conforming gray water system for my house. Even doing the toilets with rebates for 2 toilets, still out the door at $300. When you're looking at older communities with these extensive retrofits, I'd like to see what it's costing people for the legal contractors to do the full project. Because I think the rebates do not cover what we think they cover, and if we want people to do this, it has to be realistic. Lastly, I'll say that I do believe from a science standpoint that we probably have enough water molecules in this state. We need your assistance to move infrastructure projects along, to facilitate recycled water, recharge, very important, getting agencies to work together on these projects and optimize the taxpayer dollars. Because an individual project can't accomplish multiple goals. If we do recharge in a riverbed, we're solving stormwater problems, we're solving groundwater quantity issues. There's a lot of things we can do, but these are very expensive and we need to be efficient.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Liz Crossan, Los Angeles Waterkeeper, followed by Greg Weber from the California Urban Water Conservation Council, another group that's been mentioned multiple times this morning.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having this down here. I think it's been a really important event for us in Southern California, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity. I've already learned so much just from the panelists, so it's certainly informed us moving forward. Many of the water management issues that we're talking about that I think the drought has really raised to our consciousness are things that LA Waterkeeper and other California waterkeepers have been working on, but I think that this has become a new opportunity and we've recognized the urgent need to look deeper and expand those efforts. And I certainly have agreed with a lot of the comments about really shifting our messaging from just focused on the drought to water scarcity and water efficiency and this kind of being our new normal. So I'm part of a few sets of comments that were submitted, one from Green LA Coalition in Los Angeles, as well as the California Coastkeeper Alliance statewide comments. But I wanted to highlight a few things. On your question number 1, on what you could do locally, I think collaborating with groups like the Waterkeepers and NGOs on communications would be something that we'd be really open to. We are certainly a link from state agencies to the local communities, and we've had some very successful campaigns in the last 9 months on the drought. For instance, we had a Go Dirty for the Drought Dirty Car Pledge, where 7,000 people have taken a pledge to not wash their car for 60 days. 4 municipalities within LA County have taken the pledge in their city vehicles, including Long Beach and Santa Monica. And, we've seen similar efforts in Orange County and San Diego at those keeper organizations, so I would encourage you to work with us. One thing that we supported was the drinking water permit, and I want to make sure that we are ensuring that that water is being put to beneficial uses. So I really want to partner with you on that as well. As far as additional conservation, we've really been talking about a statewide landscape training and really moving towards providing that kind of information, especially considering that 56% of the water we use here in Southern California goes to outdoor use. We talked about this a lot yesterday, stormwater capture, encouraging municipalities to look at AB 2403 and to use that amendment to 218 to produce some funds so that we can do those innovative stormwater capture projects that really have a water supply nexus. In poor performing areas, what about really trying to use this underutilized waste and unreasonable use doctrine? Can we categorize and define certain uses as waste per se? Look at golf courses, cemeteries, other large commercial entities. By a date certain, it is a waste. We could also look at municipalities that don't have conservation-based rates. Is that a per se waste or unreasonable use? The failure to capture stormwater in some areas. The direct discharge of treated fresh water to the ocean is certainly, in my mind, a per se waste of a valuable resource we could be reusing. And as far as data goes, we'd like to see some data on local water use versus imported by region so that we can really talk about the sustainability of our own water, as well as the actual volume of freshwater discharge to the ocean by wastewater treatment facilities, and really talking about that recycled potential. So thanks again.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us for 2 days. Greg Weber, followed by Jenny Gain of KUA, also mentioned earlier today.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board members. I wanted to share with you just some highlights of what the council is doing to advance our shared interests in this really important topic. And these are mostly responsive to points that have been raised today. So I offer them for your information and for the information of those who are also participating in this workshop, either in the room or remotely. So the council is about to release a survey, the results of a survey that we did of 1,500 water agencies of a variety of sizes. I've mentioned this to your staff already. The focus has been on what conservation/efficiency activities these agencies have found effective, and perhaps more importantly, what tools or other assistance they would most like help on. We don't yet have the data broken out to specific agency size, but that is easily possible. Second, I'll respond to the just the previous speaker's point. The council is about to has a draft and is about to release for internal review a survey of water waste ordinances that we have commissioned. And so it's basically the landscape, if you will, of water waste ordinances around the state. So people who are interested in tuning up their water waste ordinance might take a look at this. Most importantly, I think water rates have come up repeatedly today. I know that's a matter close to your heart. The council with its partners, many of whom are in the room, Aqua, the Alliance, CASA, KUA, the Cal Nevada section, and DWR are sponsoring 2 water rates workshops. These are meant to be basically GM to GM or CFO to CFO level. The title is Crafting Water Rates for Revenue Stability and Conservation. January 15th in San Francisco, January 28th in Los Angeles, right in this building, although not in this room. So you're going to see a variety of different approaches of how these different agencies budget and volumetric and tiered pricing, how they're trying to thread the needle. And you can get more information on that on the council's website. We also we have an AMI-AMR symposium on February 26th, so that space is filling up in that. We have recently did with the Alliance and with the Water Research Foundation a component loss analysis for utilities who want to take their water loss analysis to the next level. We are going to be having a series of water loss workshops over the next 2 years, very hands-on. And then lastly, I'll just remind you,
You're the only one who's looked like he's been meditating during
I just want to remind you of our shared interest in accelerating sustainable landscaping. The council is putting together a market transformation plan, and we're going to be looking for funding sources and funding partners. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Jenny Gain from KUA, followed by James Alamillo from Hilda Bay.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Gain, and I'm the staff engineer to KUA, the California Urban Water Agencies. For those that might not be familiar with our organization, our members are 10 of the largest water agencies throughout the state. They deliver water directly and indirectly to more than 2/3 of the state's population. We really appreciate the opportunity to provide comments. We've submitted a written comment letter, and I'm just going to try to hit on several of the high points. So we've structured our responses to the 4 questions that were posed in the announcement for the workshop. In response to the first question about what more can be done on the local and state level to increase near-term conservation, we have 5 different recommendations. The first is to provide state leadership to drive statewide behavior change. We really feel that more significant and lasting behavior change by the public is the next important step to continue meaningful progress on conservation. Individual agencies can support change in behavior, but state leadership and a statewide strategy will be needed to drive this change. Specifically, we ask that the state consider new overarching requirements to go further in changing public behavior, including continued improvements and updates to the plumbing code, building codes, and the model landscape ordinance. With an expanded set of requirements in place, water agencies can facilitate further water savings with their customers by implementing various supportive programs. Our second recommendation is to expand statewide public messaging on conservation. So you've heard this from several others already. Consistent continued messaging at the state level is key to driving home a new set of expectations for public conservation behavior. KUA asks that the state fund and implement an expanded statewide outreach program. So this could include press releases, media, PSAs on TV, radio, and billboards. We'd suggest coordinating this across state agencies and with the local agencies and regional partners as well. The state could leverage successful large-scale examples from Australia and others. Our third recommendation is to focus on outdoor savings. Outdoor water use really represents the next greatest potential for next significant increment of savings. The existing model landscape ordinance is outdated, and a new version will be critical to guide the right actions to enable greater outdoor savings. It should apply to commercial and industrial areas as well as residential, and we suggest that it includes specific limitations on ornamental turf versus functional turf, recommendations to reduce or eliminate water-intensive plantings in favor of California natives, and elements to promote healthy soils and watersheds. So the ITP is obviously coming up with recommendations for landscape. Some of those could be leveraged going forward, but we really encourage that the model ordinance be the first order of priority so that we could just focus there and make some great progress. Our fourth recommendation is to engage land use agencies in conservation actions. AB 1881 is not consistently enforced by land use planning agencies, and it's actually, some land use agencies, their requirements contradict the water agency's efforts to save water. So we'd like to see them engaged in the discussion moving forward. And our fifth recommendation is to not set maximum indoor water use limits. So we know that there's a push by others to quantify an allowable indoor residential per capita use level. But we think that we'd still have much to learn about the potential there. So setting an arbitrary indoor use threshold at this point would just serve to distract from making progress on the outdoor side. So we'd be happy to work with the council and others going forward with the state, but do encourage the outdoor water use to be the focus.
Great.
So,
does that mean that you might be interested in legislation that would make it not just advisory or guidance, but mandatory?
That's a good question. It's probably one that I think we would need to think about and discuss with our agencies before answering. I also just wanted to say, while I have a moment, that we did submit a preliminary list of additional measures for the state to consider, kind of fine-tuning for some of the near-term savings, as well as a list of actions that could be taken for long-term savings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, too. So James Alamio from Heal the Bay, followed by Gretchen Knudsen from Tree People.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I want to thank the board for having this forum on urban water conservation, and like I said, the opportunity to speak. My name is James Alamio, representing Heal the Bay, but also echoing comments submitted by the Green LA Coalition. And basically, I want to echo what a lot of what has been said here regarding branding, imaging, messaging, and even terminology that is used. And as the State Water Board efforts at conservation move forward, they should move forward away from the temporary emergency drought response and more to a permanent, long-term water literacy at all levels. And we I think, highlight the consumer, but just as importantly, should be electeds, should be public agencies, and, I mean, to go so far as to say even internal staff at the various regional water quality control boards, because this leads me to my next point, which is we need to be acting holistically of how we deal with water and water management, and beyond the need for drought declarations. And the reason I say this is we have many state board policies, regional board policies regarding groundwater, stormwater, recycled water, potable water, you name it, wastewater, that seemingly are disconnected, siloed. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in front of a regional board and we're talking about one issue, and yet it has many implications on a lot of other issues, whether it's related to the EWIMPs, which you heard yesterday, mm-hmm. or the WIMPs. An issue close to my heart is 401.
Of course, the people who weren't here yesterday have no idea what you're talking about, but you don't have to explain it.
Enhanced watershed management plans. 401 issues, WDRs, and what like. And I think to Gary's point, at one time, and this may have been 10 years ago, the state board funded watershed managers. Yeah. And it would be really nice to see that maybe at the regional level. And I say this because nothing demonstrates for me water inefficiency in the state when we are struggling with pumping restrictions in the north, yet we have effluent-dominated waters in the south. That just seems ironic. But to kind of wrap it up here, we need, basically, I want to echo water budgeting, but I really want to implore the water budgeting to get more complicated, because some of the models up there were a bit simplistic. And you can offer like your indoor, outdoor use simply by maybe gray water implementation strictly from your laundry could simply offset the 20% reductions that the state or governor has asked for. And that would be a huge cost savings, not only to the user, but it doesn't take much work. And so finally, and this is more of a prop, and I'll wrap it up here. Now all right. I want to give the state board props for their DROPS program, which is the Drought Response Outreach Program to schools, because I think it is going down the right path of developing that literacy that we need from the get-go, starting with our schools and our kids. And having 2 kids of my own and knowing what Heal the Bay did with, in terms of the educational or the environmental educational initiative to try to get environmental education in schools, because there's where the true change and behavioral change will take place. So building upon that through additional grant fundings would go a long way, I think, by involving teachers, by involving Department of Education and school districts, whether through a carrot and more grants, or through, as we start to see phase 2 MS4 implementation and those school districts coming into play, that would be another mechanism to bring environmental, water quality, water literacy. And so, again, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gretchen Knudsen from Tree People, followed by Mel Plummer from the Hydrant Guard.
Hi.
What? Oh, I didn't see that.
He just came in.
Okay, there's a whole set of
Yeah, there's
folks
3 of
together. Okay, the people who are with Mel, you're gonna be next.
No, those 3 will not be speaking.
Oh, they're gone, is what you're saying. All right, well then, Connor Everts will be the next speaker.
Gretchen Knudsen from Tree People. Tree People just recently returned from Australia. We brought a delegation of policy officials and water leaders from throughout the state. We were really pleased that the chair of this board was able to join us. We were able to give exposure to this delegation to meet a variety of water leaders in Melbourne and in Adelaide. Water managers, government agencies, both on the state and local level. We were able to introduce them to homeowners, to researchers, to people who were really instrumental in crafting the Millennium Drought response, and to those who are now continuing on with that response. So I spent 2 weeks there, both with the delegation and then with a video crew traveling around to interview people about the drought and what they did. And there were some really interesting things. People were really proud of their knowledge, and they were shocked at the level of literacy that we have here. So they were shocked that we don't see water as a precious resource for the most part. They were shocked that we use Evian water in our toilets. They were shocked that we don't capture rainwater. They were shocked that we don't understand that there's right water for the right job, and you don't just use one water for everything. The interesting thing, too, is that they take a lot of pride in the change that they've had in their own literacy. And in fact, one of the homes that we visited, I got a really nice email last week from Willie and Elizabeth that live in Adelaide, and they were proud to report on their last bill that for a 2-person home, they consumed 39 gallons a day. There's a sense of pride in terms of how much they consume, and that pride came because there was information given to them in a really easy way to understand what their water use was, because high consumers don't know they're high consumers until somebody points it out. The bills that people most referred to are those that had a symbol of a person, and it showed what your person looked like, how you compared to others. And there was discussions about that. People would sort of compare their numbers to their friends. The thing that I found the most interesting, and this was talking to people on the ground, both plumbers and people who sold irrigation and cisterns, was they watched the shift from an emphasis on agriculture to a regulation that asked people that they couldn't use spray irrigation anymore. They had to use drip. And that forced your average household owner to have to rethink their entire irrigation of their land. This goes a step beyond just taking out grass. And what that did is it flooded the businesses that sold gray water supplies, it sold cisterns, it flooded them with new customers, and they were able to give these customers new information. And that led to widespread adoptions of tanks and cisterns. And I'll just end on this. It's very common now that houses there have tanks and cisterns, that they understand that they treat the house as a whole watershed. And we think that incentives would be a fantastic way to not only increase water literacy, because when people see tanks, they ask questions, but would also empower people to start collecting their own water. Just in the last 2 weeks, Tree People has collected 90,000 gallons of rainwater in our own cistern. So we know it's possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Connor Everts, followed by Melanie Winter.
Melanie's left the room, but we'll carry on some of her comments. Connor Everts, the Environmental Water Caucus and the Southern California Watershed Alliance. I want to welcome you all at the end of a long couple days, which have been nice and wet. Where Southern California, where conservation really means many things, including capturing stormwater and rainwater, gray water, water recycling, groundwater replenishment, and watershed management, and even little small parks like those of Amigos de los Rios along disadvantaged communities in the San Gabriel. Very nice piece on NPR this morning on that, and Tree People's large cistern. I really want to thank you for the numbers, because if you hadn't asked for those numbers and we didn't have some basis of comparison, we wouldn't be having this discussion here today. But I think the next point that we need to get to, where we ask for the investments. that agencies are making in conservation, so we can really compare that. And 20%, it's not clear what 20% of what is anymore when you have these huge discrepancies in per capita numbers. According to the law, by 2020, we're all supposed to be saving 20%. In 2015, we're going to get reporting on that. The governor's asked for another 20%. Does that mean we're really looking at 40% at this point? That would put us down to Australia-type numbers.
Yeah, no.
And I think we need to really think about, not about drought has been mentioned before, but what is the driest day plus fire, and we should always be planning for that. And so I'm encouraging you to make this mandatory and make it full-time and non-emergency response. We were very slow to respond to this drought in Southern California. We got mixed messages, as you mentioned, about how much water and supply we had in 2-3 years, not to worry about it. But it did take off over the summer. And 21 million square feet of lawn have been replaced. And the incentives we've blown through, I think Met's now up to backfilling 100 million, and they're going to have to fund more with those incentives. They have real value, but we have to continue that, and we have to budget for that. So last night until midnight, I was in Santa Monica, where we raised rates at 78% over 5 years on the backs of water conservation programs and some infrastructures. And to that point, we really have to talk about decoupling conservation programs and really about a loading order and the impact of greenhouse gases. I'm sorry we're still having those discussions in Santa Monica. It really turned to how can we drill, baby drill, out of our groundwater without safe yield, and that's really going backwards in the last century. So if we're going to have these solutions, I think we should look to Santa Cruz, which has become the Australia of California, where citizen involvement choosing demand reduction over new supply, and down here in Long Beach, where they've reduced water without raising rates. And they really even used a shame factor on billboards and other ways of getting water down. There are over, I think, almost 7,000 turf replacement gardens. And we don't want to just tear out turf, and those who let it dry are going to find that lawn is very pervasive, and it'll be back. I love it, the speakers up there, board members never get a bell like that, so they don't know how long they have to talk. Not you all, but board members. And anyway, we need to get serious about having more tiers, whether it's the budget-based, which works for some agencies, or other versions of that, but water agencies don't have to stop being scared of 218, and we have to make some bold decisions. I know that's not a state board decision, but I think if you push them on these others, we'll begin to change that. I wanted to thank you. The big number in the news today on water is 11 trillion gallons, what we're in deficit of. That was a deficit we started long before the drought, and we continued, but we can begin to retake that in California. I look forward, Felicia, to what you remember in the 90s when community-based organizations, and as Fran knows, led the way, and we did 1.7 million toilets. Those toilets now are 20 years old. We could do a whole nother wave of jobs and economic opportunity and replace all of those
I pointed
again.
to that part on the graph with ownership.
For those of us that have been through a few droughts, we know we can do it. I actually was drought coordinator in Pasadena at the end of the long drought. We saved 27%, but that took a staff of 17. So it needs that kind of investment from agencies to see the value. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and thanks for joining us. Next, assuming Melanie did say she had to go, so I think we lost her. Yeah. Next is Ken Weinberg, the Director of Water Resources for the San Diego County Water Authority, followed by Matt O'Malley, San Diego Coastkeeper. We have a San Diego sweep there. If that's a coincidence.
Thanks for having us today, and we were able to take the train instead of flying up, so that's appreciated.
That's very cool.
I wanted to maybe draw a sharper distinction among what you've heard from some of the speakers on the issue of long-term conservation versus extraordinary conservation. You know, the fact that your staff is reporting monthly water use figures, you know, we are facing, we don't know now, you know, being optimistic, but we're facing, you know, more dire conditions next year. And that is extraordinary conservation. And that's how do we use less water right now, and that's about how do we turn things off. And I will take the vice chair's advice and not defend the performance, But as a, an agency in the South Coast, we've been disappointed in the results. But I think I've talked to you before in that, we do have real demand hardening. In San Diego County, we've added almost 750,000 people, and we're using less water than we were 20 years ago or over 20 years ago. So I think we may be pulling the curve down right now, but the curve is lower. It starts from a lower place because of all the things that we've accomplished. So
I'm sorry, I mentioned to some people from the city of LA your gallons per capita number yesterday a couple of times because it was so much lower than theirs.
Well,
so I know that fair is fair.
Yep. No, thank you. And I appreciate Dave Pettijohn's presentation and showing what the city of San Diego had done. I wanted to, we are disappointed in the numbers. And some of this is a learning experience. And, we went to mandatory just after the emergency regulations were passed. But we've been facing some headwinds to success. And I think they're worth noting. And one is, demand hardening. So we clearly, because we started at a different place than a lot of other areas in the state, it's been harder for us to see that big savings. And we've had to do that with record-breaking heat. Now, we know we have to save water, but it does become harder because then people are looking at, gee, are they going to have to lose their investment in landscape? And we're trying to get the message out that you can stress your landscape, doesn't mean you're going to lose it. We in San Diego County have a large commercial agriculture sector. And that agriculture sector just happens to be, for purposes of the Urban Water Management Plan Act, considered urban water users. And one of the suggestions we want to make is, could we amend the reporting requirement so that these commercial agriculture operations, which are business operations just like Central Valley Ag or Central Coast Ag or elsewhere in the state, not have to report as urban water use? Because I think our impression is that is not the intent. I sleep through my alarm, so I'll probably talk through this alarm. We don't think that's the intent of the regulation, to get at commercial agriculture. And we have over 20,000 acres in production in San Diego County on a commercial basis.
But here's the question. The commercial gets exempted from the residential per capita per day, though.
Yes. Yes,
So
they do.
That's why we did make that distinction, just not to specify agriculture within urban areas, but to specify the distinction for all commercial and industrial uses, just because they're so varied.
I think that the agriculture we have is concentrated in a certain portion of the county, where you've got other, irrigation districts or agricultural areas that are not, they don't fall under, just because we actually have one agency that falls under the definition of the Agricultural Water Management Plan and the Urban Water Management Plan. So they're reporting everything. And I think,
But does that hurt them? Doesn't really hurt them.
well, I think if your intent is to not affect, not really look at what agricultural production is using in strictly agricultural areas, there seems to be an imbalance there, and you're not getting at urban
But to be
use.
fair, we're not ignoring agriculture. They're being affected in different ways, and it depends on where they get their water from you. They have a more secure water supply than the folks that are up in the valley getting fallowed and curtailed and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
So all we're focusing on is the urban outdoor, right? Are we limiting their ability to water their plants more than twice a week or whatever? Because our reporting is
No.
purely focused
Yeah.
on residential.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the point, is that you don't get at the efficacy of the regulations, because we're not trying to have that commercial agriculture cut back, and they're not subject to the waste prohibitions or the limited watering days. So does that get at what
So
you're looking to achieve?
So they're taken out, you've got residential BPD separated from commercial, but then on the percentage reduction, they'd be included, correct?
On the total percentage reduction, they're included.
Okay,
And
so
and to
that's
some
where-
extent, that
That would be
skews
an area
the
that-
South Coast numbers a
Okay.
little bit,
Yeah.
and our
Now I get
numbers.
it.
That's really the issue. There is no one answer. I know I've gone over my time, I want to just quickly go over this, but I feel it's important. There is no one answer. All of these activities support each other. I mean,
Right.
we've been looking at these numbers, at the performance, And, our agencies, the 24 retail agencies that I represent here, are taking action. I mean, they're increasing their enforcement, they're increasing their customer outreach to help them save water. They're looking at what more that they can do to knock these numbers down. Part of that is advertising, education, outreach. We think that's an important role for the state. All of the costs of enforcement, all of the things that we have to do locally have a cost. We think it's a proper role for the state to come in and increase and enhance its role in getting the message out. And this gets you to Australia, where getting that message out on a continuous, constant basis that we're all in this together seemed to be one of the factors at play. We need higher visibility.
Yeah, I think the SWRCB.com effort, which is terrific, we have to say SWRCB.com several times, the joint program from Aqua and DWR needs a lot more money than it has. It got more money during legislation, but not very much at a statewide level.
I think if you're looking to the local agencies, we know what our role is. We've done this before. As I said, we're not happy, but I think there is a role for the state in helping get that message out, buying advertising time, those kind of things, as well as a regulatory role. And we're a member of CUA. We support their comments. One of the things that we're doing sort of on a more voluntary basis, because there's no real time to change ordinances, is starting to stress in the wintertime, water 1 day a week. And that's something, we think could save water now. I think I heard from all the speakers today, we're all on the same page about long-term conservation. These are all the tools we have. We need to push hard on those fronts, but you also need to focus on saving water now if these conditions continue. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
I think
for your effort.
on that issue,
Sure.
watering 1 day a week and talking about messaging, we need to do a better job, not just investing dollars, as you're saying, more needs to go into it, but looking at regional messages, because there are some areas where it just cut it off altogether. So working together with the local agencies in order to really provide targeted messaging.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Matt O'Malley from the San Diego Coastkeeper, followed by Corrine Mandelbaum.
Good afternoon, Matt O'Malley, San Diego Coastkeeper. I'm sorry I didn't take this opportunity when I was up here yesterday to thank you all for coming to LA. It gives me the opportunity to come up from San Diego, which I don't otherwise normally have, so I appreciate it. I was looking recently at some of the numbers on the State Water Board website, and some of the factors that it explains that should be considered when you're comparing, per use capita. And one of those things kind of took me, I paid particular attention to is rainfall, temperature, and evaporation rates. And this is one of the reasons why they explain it is difficult to sort of compare across regions. And throughout it says a few times that these regions need this water for landscape maintenance, and that more water is needed in these regions. We have a irrigation district just north of the city of San Diego called Rancho Santa Fe. They consistently have been using over 500 gallons per capita per day. And I decided to maybe take a look into it, what's going on there. And staff actually alluded to this earlier. When you ask some of the questions, some of what we hear is, well, we need this water. Really what it boils down to is it's too hot, it's too dry, our lawns are too big, and our pockets are deep. And so I'm not sure that they're quite getting the message, right? And I realize this is not typical, and so I don't know if the typical approaches will work with something like this. So perhaps an atypical result is why I want to talk to you very briefly about something that you brought up, Chair Marcus, a couple of times this morning, but about taking a closer look at waste and unreasonable use and your powers with that, and perhaps adding some of those definitions to mandatory restrictions. And so perhaps it is time that we take a look at some waste and unreasonable use, such as looking at the factors that are on your website, rainfall, temperature and evaporation rates. So perhaps waste and unreasonable use might include importing water from hundreds of miles away from different ecosystems and different watersheds to irrigate ornamental lawns in places that are arid. So it's just something you might want to consider, because I don't know if people are getting the message. I'm fully supportive of landscape conservation, retrofits and the type of monies that can go into that. I don't know that these are necessarily the people who are going to take advantage of that. But I just do want to stress and fully support the comments that Gary and Liz said earlier. But as far as taking a closer look at waste and unreasonable use, also it discharges to the ocean as well. But I think those factors on your website could be used to help define waste and unreasonable use more appropriately. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it again.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us for 2 days also. Corrine Mandelbaum from Environment Now, followed by Jim Lantry from Seco System Water Control Technologies. Hello.
Hi. I'm going to try to avoid duplicating what many of the experts have told you already, but share a few just specific anecdotes from my experience working with other advocates in water efficiency and helping City of Santa Monica out in their water sustainability master plan as an advisory committee member. In Santa Monica, they have piloted the Water Smart software as a billing design, and they've already seen in 1 year's time a reduction in residential use. So if there's some way that through the drought measures, you all can adopt a condition or a requirement of water agencies to provide billing software that helps water users compare their use to their neighbor's use, to their region's use, and perhaps gets that information on a monthly basis, I think you would see greater returns in the residential sector. I know that this particular software has seen 5% returns where it's piloted their software statewide in different areas. And I wanted to reiterate with a little more detail what Connor had mentioned regarding investments. When we were just advocating at the City of Santa Monica to be more aggressive with their GPCD numbers, we were talking or looking for numbers around investments in conservation departments and outreach and messaging departments, and we could not find those numbers. We went agency to agency, and I think that that would be helpful as you're already in contact receiving monthly numbers on demand and use. If you can get the percentage of overall water agency budget dedicated to their conservation departments and or outreach departments, that would help other water agencies understand how those who are performing better are getting at their reductions that way. And last but not least, the waste and unreasonable use enforcement.
No,
Do you have a question?
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Fran, isn't there, somebody has a metric out there for what percentage should be spent on conservation messaging? No? Not that I have. Anybody? Okay, I'm making it up, sorry.
That's okay. It would be helpful.
Yeah.
So I've seen, water agencies really fear rate increases because of the backlash potential from Prop 218, let alone trying to enforce waste and unreasonable use. So better defining for them how they can be local regulators of what is excessive or wasteful use and where they can start actually implementing a penalty or a surcharge that gets them out of the Prop 218 juggernaut. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, good suggestion.
I think what you're talking about is in the BMPs that some water agencies are participating in. They turn in the amount of information that they provide, and there must be a BMP standard that's out there, but it's not a common. It's not a law.
Right, I just didn't know that there was a BMP that folks had put out. All right, so Jim Lantry, followed by Dave Boland from Aqua.
Hi, Jim Lantry from Secosys Water Control Technologies, also part of the San Diego contingent, I might add. So anyway, we are one of those state-of-the-art, or not state-of-the-art, but well, we are state-of-the-art, startup new technology companies that provide water quality or water control technology that some of the gentlemen mentioned. Ours happens to accurately measure even minute water flows in real time. It distributes water on a volumetric basis instead of a time distribution. It detects leaks and provides text, email, or voice alerts for pre-established events, including leaks or unusual water use, including a broken sprinkler or a clogged drip emitter. Offers the option of a remote or automatic water shutoffs in the event of a leak. And it provides a cloud-based analytic tool to measure water consumption against the customer's individualized water budget. In short, it fits right into some of the things we talked about budget-based pricing or allocation-based pricing. I liked a lot of what we heard today. One thing I'd like to talk about, though, is is giving consumers choice. I think that you can see in Australia, you can see in other places where if consumers are given the information that they need and the tools they need to reduce water use, they will. If you use our system or somebody else's system so that a customer can know how much water they're using in real time, instead of waiting 60 days to get their water bill and then it's too late, and give them the ability to decide the best way to go about reducing water, they will. I'll give you an example. We did a pilot project at a homeowners association in Palm Desert 2 years ago, using our system to provide them that knowledge and then using best practices for irrigation without changing turf, without changing plants. They were able to reduce their water use by 45%. Now, part of that's because they were doing it inefficiently before, but they didn't know they were doing it inefficiently before until they got that knowledge. That's the kind of thing I think that is more appropriate. If you were to just simply say, well, you have to water on only these days or at only these times, you wouldn't have achieved the same kind of reduction. If you give people the choice and allow them the options that gives them the incentive to do that, I think that they will actually come forward. And budget-based billing is one way to do that. Incentives for meeting those budgets, exceeding those budgets would also be another way to do that, and I think it would be much more productive than simple mandates of things that actually end up becoming feel-good measures as opposed to real water conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's a piece of why we did an exemption for them, but good point. Dave Boland from the Association of California Water Agencies, followed by Luis Generoso from the City of San Diego.
Thank you, Chair Marcus, Chair People, and staff. I'm David Boland with the Association of California Water Agencies. Just want to thank you for doing the workshops today. We've heard a lot of excellent information about what's been going on. It's interesting to have attended a number of these now and kind of taking stock as we get more information on reporting and just trying to understand how water agencies are responding statewide. And I think the theme that is most important here is the diversity and the fact that there are public water agencies. At Aqua, of course, represents 450 public water agencies in the state. Many agencies that were here are members of Aqua, as well as a lot of agencies that weren't here. A lot of the dots on the cluster diagrams there are Aqua members, big and little, north and south, urban, very rural districts, inland, as well as coastal, with lots of different kinds of microclimates and lots of different kinds of rate structures and lots of different realities. I think we've appreciated the way we've had a collaborative relationship that Water Board has triggered this response to drought through the emergency measures, and we've seen a really strong response statewide. It's been uneven, admittedly. It's been varied, but we think appropriate in many cases to the areas and to the cultures of those districts. We've seen a lot of successes. I think that's one thing that needs to be underscored here, is that statewide we've seen a significant response this year over 2013. And 2013 was a relatively, we have a lot of investment in messaging and a lot of changes that have occurred over long periods of time. I think we've seen that from a number of the water agencies. And so 2013 was already relatively strong in terms of water conservation in different parts of the state. And so then we've seen an additional response in 2014. But headed into 2015, I think the underscored message that we've heard time and again is that we need to stay the course. We need to double down. We need to focus on the long term. We need to focus on the investments in management of data and an ability to message to our ratepayers and to the customers. And we need to, I guess, transfer from a emergency response kind of approach, even if 2015 is extremely dry, and even if we do have a drought message as the primary message, we need to transfer to this idea that we do have this new normal and that we are into a significant new approach, not new, in fact, it's been in motion for a lot of years, but this idea that we are moving California into a new water use ethic that involves conservation as a fundamental element of a statewide water plan, and that it is the #1 element in the administration's water plan. It's an important element. We need to do it, and we need to proceed with these new measures. many of which we've heard. One thing I would like to underscore is the fact that this idea of water rates as a powerful tool is gathering traction. We are co-sponsoring with a number of other water management entities a series of workshops. There's been a lot of interest in this. We had several panels at Aqua, and I appreciate Chairperson, Vice Chair Spivey Weber's attendance at one of the water rate programs, and we had actually 3 of them that were pretty influential, I think, in getting the message out about different kinds of rate structures that are available. And so we want to message. We need to also, I think the other theme that I wanted to unpack is the need to focus on the Save Our Water program and the fact that it has been a drought messaging program. We did turn from a kind of a conservation. We pivoted to a drought messaging. I think now, again, there's a need to finesse that program and the messaging and try to communicate the fact that even though we've got rain, it's about storage, it's about long-term sustainability, it's about long-term commitments to managing that resource effectively. So we support a lot of the information and materials that are here. We do want to underscore the fact that this needs to be done at a local level. We appreciate that understanding at the State Water Board, and we stand ready to help.
Great. Thank you for the considerable help you've already given us. And we should talk about ways to get more money into the Save Our Water campaign.
Yeah, one other element that Chairperson Moore mentioned at one of the places there we plugged Aqua, actually, we have a great source of data on our site in terms of activities at a finer grain that water agencies have reported to us. Mm-hmm. That information may or may not be available to the Water Board. They're kind of 2 separate databases, a little bit different reporting approaches. But some of that self-reported data does provide a finer grain as to what a lot of water agencies are doing, and this idea of comparison of measures, what works and what doesn't work, and the fact that the industry can kind of learn from itself. So thank you.
We have a link to it on our site.
Yes, thanks.
And our last speaker is Luis, is it Generoso or Generoso? Generoso. Wasn't sure. City of San Diego.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here and happy to be supportive of the State Board's efforts in conservation. Luis Generoso, Water Resources Manager from the City of San Diego. You are very much aware of the situation in San Diego and South Coast. I actually saw one of the speakers use San Diego's GPCD numbers in his presentation, so very much aware. And in San Diego, we've actually always tried to enhance our conservation efforts and savings. Just this year in July, what we did is we enhanced our turf replacement program. We've had it for 3 years, but we listened to our customers. And one of the comments that they said is that, we have bigger backyards than front yards. So we actually tried and get additional funding. We put our own money, operating funds, and also worked with stormwater, since there is a benefit for stormwater. And we were able to come up with over $1 million. And we started that program in July 1st, and eight weeks it was all committed. So the information is there, the need is there. Our customers we've been trying to get our customers through the County Water Authority and Metropolitan Water District's rebate, but it is right for customers to listen to the message. We also, talking about working with stormwater, we leverage our rebate program process with their dollars to come up with a rain barrel rebate funded by stormwater because of runoff being prevented and saving water as well. And we offer $1 per gallon up to 400 gallons, up to $400 rebate. Very effective, lots of people applying, and majority of the people that sign up for it, it's not just the 50-gallon ones that they're getting, it's multiple ones. We're averaging about 250 gallons, so $250 checks. Also recently, we had a year-long stakeholder process, Water Policy Implementation Task Force. We got feedback from our customers, our stakeholders, as to how we can improve conservation. They came up with a lot of good suggestions, and we've been implementing them. So lots of positive, active things happening in San Diego, but then when you look at the reports, it looks like San Diego and South Coast is more of a slacker. So we really do support the comments about looking at longer track record. Our official comments are part of the cool letter. Mm-hmm. And And what else? That's it, I guess.
That's good. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Because as I work with staff, when we get the preliminary numbers and when things pop out, I ask questions because I know then the press is going to ask me what they're going to jump to. So I did spend a lot of time with the media on your numbers at the last report. And part of it was pointing to the fact that you have a lower GPCD than almost anybody other than Sacramento or San Francisco or Santa Cruz, which is something to take note of because of those previous efforts. But also that you had bumped up your drought contingency planning because you weren't happy with your numbers either to what is it, stage 3? So I just want to give you an opportunity to say what took effect November 1st?
Okay, well, let me backtrack a little bit. The drought response plan that we had was developed in 2008, along with a lot of drought plans in San Antonio. And it was to come up with, level 2 up to 20% reduction in consumption. And that was based on current levels back then. And so when we entered the drought in 2009 and 2011, we implemented level 2 restrictions, and we were averaging 17, 18% reduction. It was working. It was working. But then in 2011, when the drought was declared over, we kept a lot of our restrictions as permanent restrictions. The level 2 restrictions, we kept them as permanent. So a lot of our consumption stayed low through the years. Maybe there was a little uptick, but there was no bounce back to previous levels. And so it is becoming more of a challenge, trying to show significant reductions from a more recent base year. Right. But it's not all bad, because while we know that for a fact and it's going to be a challenge, it also tells us that we need to look at our drought response plan, because it was based on 2007 levels. And if we were to implement a drought response plan now and try and think that if we implement level 2, we can get up to 20% reduction, it may not necessarily be there. So that's one of the things that we'll also be looking at, see how we can have a better tool, a more updated tool, if we were to look at more recent baselines.
Right, but something new took effect November 1st.
Level 2.
Oh, that
we
was
went
just
to level 2.
I thought you went to 3.
No, we went to level 2, and really our level 2 was the 3 days a week watering and run times, which was 10 minutes, or in November it was 7 minutes a day. We're one of those agencies that did not go to two days a week, because instead of 3 days, 10 minutes, or then 2 days, 10 minutes, we did 3 days, 7 minutes. About the same, but then people just remembered their 3 days. They didn't have to remember another set of days.
Thank you, it's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the efforts. Other questions or comments?
I'm curious as to what your questions are as staff from what you've heard.
Well, I've been thinking, as we're hearing the comments, and the one comment we heard a lot over and over was making the data more available, and what we've made it very available. But I think a commenter made the point that, well, it's in Excel, and you got to kind of be technically savvy, and your average person doesn't see. It's hard for them to see, well, what does this mean to me? So that's definitely been a take-home point for me, and that I think that's something we could probably do if the board wants to, is have more information visually available, and to have it easier to get at the information rather than just the data. I think the data is good, and it's important to keep up there. So that's something certainly is, to me, an easy thing to address. The longer term aspects, I think we need to kind of huddle and think about what makes sense. I mean, we heard a ton about allocation-based rates. I'm not sure what a short-term incentive would look like. So I think we need to do some thinking on it.
Well, on that piece, on the allocation-based rates, which I agree, we heard a ton on, I think we're going to have to figure out how to collect information or to incentivize tools or something for getting the indoor standards, the 55 gallons per capita per day, or what is it, 55 per day per person per day on indoor, and then the ET numbers outdoor. And I know the SEMA system isn't widespread. We don't have all the data availability that we need for outdoor, but it seems to me that we're going to have to get there, and we're going to have to get there fairly quickly. So any thoughts that you all have, and any thoughts that you have, or those that are watching have, as to how we, what is it that we need to require now that will start to get us there? Because I don't think the water agencies know this information. Now, maybe they don't need to know, and maybe we can figure it out. But if they have to provide us information in order for us to know about outdoor versus indoor, I think that's going to be key, because it's going to be the threshold to getting to budget-based rates. They've got to get there first before they can do budget-based rates. So I'm still grappling with how we go, but I'm almost sure it's requiring data.
I think that's
coming
a good point. And one of the things that worked really well with the first set of regulations is we had a lot of communication with the NGOs and the water suppliers, and we asked them, what is most effective, rather than us trying to prescribe something, because they have a lot of expertise and experience. So I think that would be an important next step, is to work with them to figure out what is the information that's needed. The concern with getting the information for the budget-based rates, if we require it, in some areas it's already, a lot of it's available, or some of it's available, not so much the imagery, but the evapotranspiration data. But as you heard today, it's not available in all the areas. But if we require it, you have to actually put measuring equipment on the ground. It's not trivial, the effort. It's not like this is, the information we're currently requiring, for the most part, I think people had that information available, and it was a matter of taking the time to compile it and summarize it. The next step, the information for the allocation-based rates, from what I gather, it would require quite a bit more work. So I do think it would be helpful to get additional input.
From agencies.
From agencies.
Well, along those lines, and we did hear a fair amount about just how important the information is. And I think today was really strong for us on message about just collecting the information, getting it out there. And just wondering on with respect to areas that have allocation-based rates, we also heard about profiling and telling stories. Could we, in the meantime, because this is going to take a lot, have sort of a narrative profiling those agencies and getting information about what did it take, what were the factors that got them there, what were the challenges in terms of public acceptance and cost. I don't know that would have the intended effect, to spread this further, but in the meantime, I think it is going to be a challenge getting that, getting those tools out there in order to get the additional data in short order. Long term, definitely.
We can certainly look at expanding or enhancing the stories that we have out there right now. So we have tried to characterize quite a number of the agencies. They're doing some really great things out there. I would just offer that I think we heard a lot of different ideas in the area of communication and education. How do we help people to learn about what's going on, because folks really do want to do the right thing, and how do we inform them, educate them. We heard a lot about the data itself and transparency of the information, and finding ways for people to access tools to figure out how they rate relative to their neighbor or the next community, et cetera, where we can take into account factors like ET, et cetera. And then we also heard a lot about funding, finding ways within our funding programs, whether it's the bond money, whether it's our SRF or otherwise, to try to provide some incentives to make, whether it's allocation-based rate structures or something else.
Or leaks.
Or
The whole
leaks.
leak
We've heard a
audit
lot
issue.
about that too, work. And so I would suggest that maybe one of the things we want to do is go back, keeping in mind one of the presenters' comments about how we need to distinguish between long-term conservation versus kind of the emergency at hand today, and look at, within those categories of recommendations, what may make sense just to try to provide assistance on to move forward over the long term, and are there then elements or aspects of those areas of recommendations that really are important to make sure they're done now, and those could be candidates then for next steps that we would come back to you with. But I think we need to go back and kind of distill the information and look at those two pieces, long-term versus what's needed now.
Yeah, and I had a couple of other things, and I agree, this needs to kind of bake for a little bit here, but I like the idea of investment reporting, and I just don't know if that information is available, but the percentage of budget that is spent on conservation and education, I like that idea. Recognizing also that we don't want to have too much information out there because then we'll start to overload, but two areas that seem to me to be good value as far as additional information would be on conservation and education budgets. And then also, I need to understand more about this leaky pipe issue and urban water management plans, and I guess it's already required, but you got to go someplace else for that. So it'd be nice to have, to the extent that that information is being collected already, to have that included in our report as well, kind of giving a bigger picture.
Well, the good news is that urban water management plans are going to be updated. They normally would be updated in 2015, but I think it's going to be extended to the summer of 2016 is when when folks have to turn them in. So now is a good time to be talking with our colleagues at DWR who are doing this, because there may be some opportunities that they are seeing too. They have certain things they have to do, but there may be some things that they can help us with.
Yeah, on my list is getting together with our colleagues at DWR. I was regretting that we didn't have Peter and other people sitting here with us. Hopefully they've been listening to that. I feel like I should have thought of that.
I guess one other comment on the conservation staffing. Often the conservation staffs in kind of some water agencies that don't have the capacity to do a lot of singular, sort of intense work. It's in their public information department, so it really is a conservation person, but they serve as a media messaging person as well, and so you're not going to get real distilled information when you get that kind of information. So we should be thinking through, if we get that information as to what capacity they have for communication in conservation, how are they measuring the performance of that unit? Is it in, are they actually getting reductions in water use through that effort? Because it's always been a squishy area in the California Urban Water Conservation Council and the BMPs. It's just been a super squishy number because every agency has some kind of a communicator division, and often that's where conservation gets put, and it doesn't necessarily deliver conservation.
Oh, interesting.
Just also to point out there that when we were at a California Water Association conference a number of weeks ago, that some of the conservation messaging has really been integrated and embedded with the implementation efforts of the water agencies on your regulations. So there's a huge prevention component within the enforcement area. So for communities like, I'm thinking Santa Cruz, which met such dire circumstances earlier and continues to do so this year, they have embedded the whole concept of prevention into their enforcement, but it really is an outreach campaign, and it really is about being out there, working with the community, advising them of the practices that are perhaps more wasteful than others, and really educating them. And so it's going to be difficult to tease out those kind of activities when you're putting together the conservation budget.
It's always complex, isn't it? It's true. We got a lot today. I think the panels were excellent. Thank you for putting those together. I think the individual speakers were excellent. I think people came really in a very thoughtful way with a lot of, and I got a lot of answers as well as some interesting questions to different things. And I do think we need to marinate on it, and you guys are incredibly good at sorting it all out. But I think we should consider not just the tune-up, but the messaging value in our regs and take to heart. Again, I know there's some trepidation, I'm not saying do it, but consider things like those hospitality rules, the restaurant rules, the symbolic ones from a indoor perspective. I'm not saying do it, but I think we need to consider a tune-up of that level, as well as really looking at whether those drought contingency plan levels, all things being equal, could have a little bit of a lift, or whether it's something else. I really did hear that the sharing of information was critically important, and so thinking about what our options are for adding that info out there so that we're painting a good picture is important, and then we can just pick and choose, knowing that we can't do all of them. You're thinking on what would be good candidates for that, as well as how to think about encouraging appropriate targets, and they're going to be different in different places. We're going to need to put our heads together about the notion of more statewide messaging. That's a dollar issue that I have no idea whether the Resources Agency asked for more in this year's budget. Hopefully they did, but we need to think about that as something important. Even though the lion's share of the money is spent in the local level, we talked about how to measure it, I do think that the overall state messaging is helpful. We've been able to get a lot of free media because of the nature of how our regulations were framed, whether intentionally or not. So I'm not sure. The fines, I'm not giving a thumbs down to, because the fines are why I think people in Southern California know there's a drought. I wish I had done that intentionally, but I hadn't. And so just, should we be considering pushing more landscape ordinances, any of those things? I mean, I probably have 100 ideas that came out today, and so you're good thinking and being able to lay those out for us, both and what's legally possible and then what's psychically appropriate at the state level. I think it's always important to figure out what's our appropriate role, but I think we've gotten a lot of validation, not just today, but anecdotally in other hearings, and today that people feel that us stepping up has been helpful. So if we put our heads together and sit down also with our DWR colleagues, hopefully we'll come up with a menu of things where we can not just tune up our regs, but also where we can, work on all cylinders to give support to getting people there through funding and otherwise.
I did think of one other, the PUC is going to be a partner in this. And let's not get to them late.
Thank you, of course, yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
get to them up front, that this is coming up. We need to all be thinking about how the regulated community under the PUC, as well as the public agencies that we have more jurisdiction with. And then also I would say the mutuals. I think we totally missed the mutuals for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we need to be communicating with the association and make sure that they are part of this conversation.
Other thoughts? Well, I'll thank our speakers again, all of our speakers, not just the panel, and thank you to the staff, as always, for doing a fabulous job, and thank you for even more bubble charts. Those are really good, especially when you broke out the agency sizes. It was terrific. So thanks, and appreciate all the input, and we'll see you all soon. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Hi, dear.
So you may want this or not. It's actually not
what is
very
it?
useful, but it was given